Section 1. The Yellow Family, Hiding in Plain Sight. Here is a fact so ordinary that you have probably never once stopped to consider it. The Simpsons is a comedy about a family. That is the sentence most people would use to describe it. That is what it says on the packaging, more or less. It airs in the prime time slot where comedies air. It has a laugh track and some international edits. It won Emmy Awards in the comedy category. The characters say funny things and get into funny situations, and the music underneath it all is bouncy and warm and reassuring. You laugh, the credits roll, you go to sleep. Everything is fine. But here is the other fact. The one that sits underneath the first one, the way a foundation sits under a house. If you look at the Simpsons family, not as characters in a cartoon, but as a family unit, a group of human beings who love each other and are trying to survive the world together, what you find is not comedy at all. What you find is one of the most quietly devastating portraits of American domestic life ever committed to film. What you find is a family that should not still be standing. And what makes that remarkable? What makes it worth 4 hours of a quiet night and a comfortable place to lie down is that the show has been showing you this the entire time. Every episode, every season, all 36 years of it. It never hid anything. It just trusted that you would be too busy laughing to look closely. So, tonight, we are going to look closely. Tonight, we are going to move slowly through the architecture of the Simpsons family. We are going to walk through every room of that house on Evergreen Terrace and look at what is actually there. Not the jokes on the surface, the reality underneath. Because when you strip away the cartoon logic and the reset button and the warm tuba music that plays when everything is supposed to be okay, what you find in that family is something that feels uncomfortably, specifically, truthfully real. Let us start with the house itself. 742 Evergreen Terrace. 2 stories. Yellow exterior. A single car in the driveway that is somehow always the same car, regardless of what happens to it between episodes. A lawn that Homer mows with varying enthusiasm depending on the decade. A doghouse in the yard for Santa's little helper. A bird bath that has been knocked over, destroyed, and replaced so many times it has essentially become an idea rather than an object. The house is a modest house. Not poor exactly, but not comfortable either. It occupies that specific economic stratum that Americans used to call middle class, and that the show itself has spent 3 decades quietly watching erode. Homer works at the nuclear power plant and earns a salary that the show has never quite nailed down, but that seems to be perpetually on the edge of not being enough. Marge does not work outside the home for most of the series run, though she has brief careers as a police officer, a real estate agent, a painter, a pretzel vendor, a car salesman, and a dozen other things before always returning to the house and the children and the domestic life that she chose and keeps choosing over and over again. They have 3 children and a dog and a cat and a house that they own. On paper, they are fine, but watch the house. Watch it closely over 36 years of episodes. The roof leaks. Homer fixes it badly, and then it leaks again. The car breaks down regularly. The refrigerator makes sounds it should not make. The basement floods. The attic contains things that suggest a history the family never fully discusses. There is always something wrong with 742 Evergreen Terrace, and there is always just enough money to fix the most urgent thing and not quite enough to fix everything else. This is not comedy. This is the specific texture of financial anxiety that most American families know from the inside. The way nothing is ever quite fixed. The way you address the loudest problem and try not to think about the quieter ones gathering in the background. The way the house becomes a measure of how close to the edge you are at any given moment. But the house is just the container. What matters is the family inside it. Homer Simpson, Marge Simpson, Bart Simpson, Lisa Simpson, Maggie Simpson. 5 people, 1 address, 36 years. And the thing that the show has been showing you for all of those years, the thing that sits underneath every joke and every reset and every time the credits roll and everything is back to normal, is that this family is held together not by circumstance or convenience or the easy inertia of people who have simply never found a reason to leave. This family is held together by love. And love, the show has been quietly insisting for 3 decades, is not the same thing as happiness. Love is what keeps Marge in that house on mornings when Homer has done something that a less devoted woman would not forgive. Love is what keeps Homer coming home every night to a family he knows he is not good enough for and trying again anyway. Love is what keeps Bart showing up for his father, even when his father forgets his birthday, forgets his name, forgets that his son is standing right there waiting to matter. Love is what keeps Lisa from leaving a family that cannot quite hold her, that cannot quite match the frequency of her intelligence and her feeling, that cannot give her what she needs but gives her what it has and means it completely. Love in the Simpsons universe is not romantic, and it is not easy, and it is not clean. Love is Homer falling asleep on the couch and Marge putting a blanket over him. Love is Bart protecting Lisa when the world is cruel to her, even though he will never admit it out loud. Love is Maggie reaching up for Homer's hand and Homer, without thinking, taking it. The show never stops to make a speech about any of this. It never pauses to announce that what you are watching is actually a meditation on the nature of family love and the specific endurance required to keep a household functional across decades. It just shows you. Episode after episode, season after season, it shows you this family surviving things that should have broken them. And it plays the tuba music, and it rolls the credits, and you laugh or you smile or you go to sleep feeling warm about something you cannot quite name. What you are feeling is recognition, because the Simpsons are not an exaggerated cartoon family. They are an honest one. The exaggeration is the delivery. The honesty is the content. Homer's failures are the specific failures of a father who loves his children more than he understands them. Marge's patience is the specific patience of a woman who made a choice and has committed to that choice with everything she has, even on the days when the choice is hard. Bart's anger is the specific anger of a boy who wants his father to see him and is not sure his father is capable of looking that carefully. Lisa's loneliness is the specific loneliness of a child who is more intelligent than her environment and has nowhere to put that intelligence except into music and books and the quiet company of her own thoughts. These are not cartoon problems. These are human problems dressed in yellow skin and given 4 fingers on each hand. And here is the detail that makes the whole thing land with particular force. The show never resolves any of it. In a conventional comedy, the problems are solved. The misunderstanding is cleared up. The estrangement ends. The character learns a lesson and applies it. By the end of the episode, the status has been restored. Yes, but the character has grown, has changed, is measurably different from who they were when the episode began. In The Simpsons, nobody changes. Ever. Homer learns the same lesson about being a better father approximately 400 times across 36 years, and is no better a father in season 36 than he was in season 1. Bart never quite grows into the better version of himself that keeps appearing in single-episode flashes of potential. Lisa never finds the community she is looking for. Marge never stops carrying the weight she has always carried. A critic would call this lazy writing, a fan would call it episodic structure. Both are right, technically. But there is a third reading, the one that makes the show feel less like a cartoon and more like life. Nobody changes because change is hard. Because the same people who love each other most deeply are also the ones most perfectly positioned to wound each other in the same places over and over again. Because families are not problems to be solved. They are conditions to be lived in. And the Simpsons family is a condition that Homer and Marge and Bart and Lisa and Maggie have been living in for 36 years. And it has not gotten easier, but it has not broken them either. And that, when you sit with it quietly on a late night with the lights down, is not funny at all. It is something much closer to the truth. Now, let us talk about these specific details. Because the beauty of The Simpsons as an object of close attention is that the show is extraordinarily dense. Every frame of it contains more information than you can absorb on a single viewing. The animators, the writers, the directors, they layered detail upon detail upon detail across 3 decades, and most of that detail is sitting in the background of episodes you have seen 100 times, waiting to be noticed. The details in the house alone. The living room couch is the central icon of the show. The couch gag is the opening signature. But look at the living room itself, beyond the couch. in the quieter moments when the family is simply sitting there being a family. The room is cluttered, but not chaotic. It is the clutter of a family that has accumulated life rather than objects. The framed photos on the walls, the bookshelves that suggest Marge reads more than Homer does. The television that occupies the center of the family's collective attention, the altar at which they gather every evening. The television in the Simpsons household is doing a lot of work as a symbol. It is the thing that Homer disappears into. It is the background radiation of their domestic life. It is the thing that keeps the family in the same room together, even when they are not really talking to each other. And it is, in a very specific sense, a mirror. The Simpsons sitting on a couch watching television is us watching television, watching them. And the show has always been aware of this particular loop in a way that occasionally makes it feel less like entertainment and more like a document. The kitchen is Marge's room, not in a retrograde, old-fashioned sense. The show has always been clear that Marge chose this domestic role and is performing it with a competence and dedication that the family takes entirely for granted. But the kitchen is the room where Marge is most herself, and the details in that kitchen tell you something about her that the episodes rarely say directly. The oven that is always on. The counter that is always clean, even in scenes that follow immediately after chaos. The refrigerator full of food that Homer depletes at a rate the show occasionally acknowledges and mostly ignores. The kitchen is an expression of Marge's will applied to the physical world. She keeps it orderly. She keeps it functional. She keeps it the way she keeps everything she is responsible for, through relentless, unacknowledged effort. The children's rooms. Bart's room is the room of a boy who is more complicated than the world gives him credit for. Posters on the walls. A bed that is always unmade. Toys and tools of mischief scattered across surfaces in a way that suggests not sloppiness, but preoccupation, a mind too busy to organize its space. But then there are the other things. The skateboard hung on the wall like a trophy. The occasional book that should not be in a room belonging to a boy who is supposed to not care about books. The window that opens onto the tree and the yard and the outside world that Bart is always trying to escape toward. Bart's room is the room of a boy who is performing a character, the bad kid, the troublemaker, the underachiever, and occasionally forgetting to keep the performance consistent. Lisa's room is the saddest room in the house. Not because anything is wrong with it. It is neat, which is its own small statement. It has books on proper shelves, arranged with the care of someone who understands that books are a serious possession. It has her saxophone in its case. It has the occasional academic trophy that the family celebrates briefly and then forgets. And it has a quality that is hard to name but easy to feel when you look at it. Lisa's room is the room of a child who has retreated into her own interior world because the exterior world cannot hold her. It is tidy because Lisa imposes order where she can. Because the house and the family and the town are beyond her control and always have been, but her room is not. Her room she can make exactly as she wants it, and she wants it quiet. She wants it full of the things that feed the part of her that nothing in Springfield can feed. Books, music, her own thoughts, given space to breathe. Lisa Simpson is 8 years old, and she has already learned that she is going to spend most of her life waiting to get somewhere else. The room tells you this. It has always told you this. Maggie's room is the warmest room in the house, not because it is decorated with more care than the others, though Marge has clearly given it more attention than she has given her own bedroom. Maggie's room is warm because it is the room of someone who is loved with a specific, protective, gentle completeness. The mobile above the crib. The toys arranged with access rather than display in mind. The rocking chair in the corner where Marge has sat in the darkness with a small warm weight against her shoulder and just breathed. If there is a room in 742 Evergreen Terrace that is not haunted by anything, it is this one. And even that is its own kind of sad because the warmth in it is the warmth of a family protecting the youngest member from the things that have already shaped the older ones. Maggie's room is the family's hope in physical form. Homer and Marge's bedroom is a room the show visits with more discretion than most of the others. It is not Marge's room, and it is not Homer's room. It is the room they share. And in the sharing of it is the whole story of their marriage, which is a story we will spend a great deal of time on later in this journey. For now, just notice the room. The way it is both of them and neither of them completely. The way it is the space where the marriage lives when it is not performing itself for the family. The double bed, the two pillows, the lamp on Marge's side that suggests she reads before she sleeps, the nothing on Homer's side that suggests he does not. Everything about that room is two people who are very different choosing to share a space, and choosing, again, every single night, for 36 years. That is the house, Yang. That is the container. Now let us talk about the family that lives in it, one by one, with the kind of attention the show itself has been applying to them for 3.5 decades, without ever quite saying out loud what it found. Let us talk about what The Simpsons are really about. Not the jokes, not the plots, not the celebrity guest appearances and the couch gags and the chalkboard openings, the real thing underneath. The thing that, if you have been watching this family long enough, you already know without being able to say exactly when you learned it. This family is proof that love can be imperfect and unconditional at the same time, that a family can be a source of profound pain and absolute safety simultaneously, that the people who wound us most thoroughly and most repeatedly are usually the same people we would run to first if something terrible happened. The Simpsons has been making this argument in the background of every episode since 1989, and it is a more honest and more complicated argument than most dramas ever manage. It just happens to have a laugh track. It just happens to air on Sunday nights. It just happens to look like a cartoon. But it is not a comedy. It never was. It was always something stranger and quieter and truer than that. And over the next few hours, we are going to prove it. If you are still here, drop a comment with the time and where you are watching from. There is something genuinely strange about a video like this, existing simultaneously in 100 different time zones, in 100 different beds and living rooms and late-night kitchens, and I want to know where you are in the world right now. And if you are getting something from this, subscribe. It takes 2 seconds, and it means the world. Section 2. Homer's Brain. A map of damage. Let us begin with the donut. Not any particular donut. All of them. The donut as an object in the Simpsons universe, the thing that Homer reaches for first in every moment of stress, or joy, or boredom, or confusion. The pink frosted donut with sprinkles that has become so associated with Homer Simpson that it functions as a kind of logo for both the character and the show. You see that donut, and you know exactly where you are. But here's the question nobody asks about the donut, or at least not often enough. Why does Homer eat the way he does? Not as a joke, not as a character shorthand for appetite or gluttony or the kind of cheerful excess that reads as harmless in a cartoon. As a genuine question about a specific human being and the specific reasons human beings develop the relationships with food and pleasure and immediate comfort that they do. Homer Simpson eats compulsively. He eats when he is happy. He eats when he is sad. He eats when he is bored, when he is anxious, when he is frustrated, when the solution to a problem is not immediately apparent, and he needs something to do with his hands and his mouth while his brain catches up to the situation. He eats past fullness. He eats things that are not food. He eats with a specific and observable desperation that, if you strip away the cartoon physics and the laugh track, does not look like enjoyment at all. It looks like self-medication. And the reason Homer Simpson self-medicates with food is the same reason any human being does. Because somewhere at some point, the food became the thing that was reliably there when other things were not. Because comfort eating is learned behavior, and Homer learned it very young. And the thing he was compensating for was large enough and consistent enough that the behavior never became unnecessary. Homer Simpson grew up without a mother. He was 6 years old when she disappeared. He woke up one morning and she was gone, and his father told him she was dead. And Homer spent the next decades of his life carrying a grief that was never properly named. Because the story he was given was a lie, and lies do not give you permission to properly mourn. You cannot grieve someone properly when you have been told a fiction about how you lost them. The grief sits in you incorrectly. It metabolizes wrong. It becomes something other than grief because it has nowhere real to go. Homer's grief became appetite. It became the specific, tireless hunger of a man who is always reaching for something and never quite connecting with what he actually needs. This is not a theory. The show makes this explicit across multiple episodes, and the episodes do not present it as funny. They present it as devastating, and then they surround the devastating thing with jokes, and the jokes give you permission to not quite sit with what you just saw. But if you strip the jokes away, if you watch the quiet moments between the laughs, you see it clearly. Homer Simpson is a wounded person. He has been wounded since childhood, and the wound has never healed because it was never properly diagnosed. Now, let us talk about the brain. Because the brain is where the most important damage lives, and the show has been documenting Homer's neurological situation with a specificity that suggests the writers understood exactly what they were doing. The IQ of 55. This number gets mentioned, noted as a joke about Homer's stupidity, and then moved past. But an IQ of 55 is not a joke. An IQ of 55 in the real world is classified as a moderate intellectual disability. It is a level of cognitive function that typically requires supported living arrangements. It is a number that suggests a brain that is genuinely, clinically impaired in its ability to process information, draw connections, hold consequences in mind while making decisions. Homer Simpson, by the show's own stated measurement, has the cognitive function of someone with a significant developmental disability. And he is employed as a safety inspector at a nuclear power plant. He is raising 3 children. He is operating a motor vehicle. The show plays all of this for comedy. But underneath the comedy is a portrait of a man who is doing an extraordinary amount with a brain that the world has badly underestimated in the wrong direction. Not by thinking he is smarter than he is, but by expecting him to function in contexts that are genuinely beyond his cognitive reach, and then laughing at him when he fails. And then there is the crayon. Season 12. Homer discovers that lodged in his brain, pushed up through his nasal cavity at some point in his childhood, is a crayon that has been sitting against his frontal lobe for the entirety of his adult life. The crayon has been physically reducing his cognitive function. It is a foreign object sitting in the part of the brain responsible for higher reasoning, creativity, impulse control, and the capacity for emotional complexity. When the crayon is removed, Homer's IQ jumps dramatically. He becomes articulate, perceptive, capable of understanding things that have always eluded him. He can follow complex arguments. He can see through the systems that have been manipulating him. He can feel his emotions with the full force of someone who has the cognitive infrastructure to actually process what he is feeling. And he is miserable. Not because intelligence is inherently miserable, but because Homer's particular intelligence, suddenly unlocked in the middle of a life that was built around his limitations, gives him access to truths about his situation that his damaged brain had been protecting him from. He can see what his marriage actually costs Marge. He can understand what his job actually is and is not. He can look at Springfield with clear eyes for the first time and recognize it for what it is. And what it is unbearable. So he has the crayon put back in. He chooses, knowingly and deliberately, to return to a diminished version of himself. He chooses cognitive limitation over clarity, because clarity, for Homer, is not a gift. It is a wound. Think about this choice. Really sit with it. Homer Simpson, given the opportunity to be fully himself, to have access to the complete version of his own mind, decides that the complete version of his mind is something he cannot afford to live with. That is not a joke. That is a man who has been so thoroughly damaged by his circumstances that the working version of his brain has become a survival mechanism. The stupidity is not who Homer is. The stupidity is what Homer needs in order to keep getting up in the morning. And the show makes this explicit and then immediately softens it with a joke and moves on. But the explicit part was real. The episode said it directly. Homer is not just a lovable idiot. Homer is a man whose intelligence was physically suppressed by an injury sustained in childhood, possibly not accidentally, and who, when given the chance to reclaim that intelligence, found that the world he had built on top of his impairment had no room for the person he would have been without it. That is tragedy. That is specific, structured, deeply human tragedy. And it aired on a Sunday night on Fox. Now let us talk about Homer's relationship with his father, because it is essential to understanding the full picture of the damage. Abe Simpson, Grandpa. The old man in the retirement home who tells rambling stories that start in one place and end somewhere entirely different. The man who fought in the war and saved Private Ryan, maybe, depending on which episode you were in. The man with the onion tied to his belt, which was the style at the time. Abe is a comedy character. Broad, eccentric, a vehicle for jokes about memory loss and generational disconnect, and the specific comedy of old age that the show has always handled with a mixture of affection and cruelty. But Abe Simpson also abandoned Homer to a retirement home while Homer was still a child in need of a father. He sent him to live with his aunt and uncle. He showed Homer a gravestone that was not his mother's and told him she was dead, and he maintained that lie for the entirety of Homer's childhood and adolescence and early adulthood. The retirement home jokes obscure this. The eccentric old man character gives you permission to not look too hard at what kind of father Abe actually was. But if you look, you see a man who failed his son in the specific way that men of his generation were equipped to fail their sons. Not through cruelty, but through absence, through emotional unavailability, through the lie that was easier than the truth and the distance that was more comfortable than closeness. Abe failed Homer, and Homer has spent his entire adult life both desperately seeking the approval of father figures, Burns in a darkly ironic way, but also any male authority figure who will occasionally acknowledge his existence, and also in his own parenting, trying to be everything his father was not. He is not always successful. He falls asleep when he should be listening. He misses things. He shows up late and gets the important details wrong. He says the wrong thing at the moment when the right thing would have meant everything. But he tries. Every single episode, in between the disasters and the failures and the jokes at his expense, Homer Simpson tries to be present for his children. And the effort, the specific straining effort of a man who is not shown how to do this and is improvising in real time with the tools his damaged brain will allow him, is one of the most genuinely moving things the show has ever done. Homer is not a good father because he never had a good father to show him what that looks like. He is the father, his IQ of 55, and his absent mother, and his emotionally withholding father, and his crayon-impaired frontal lobe and his decades of radiation exposure allow him to be. And within all of those constraints, he loves his children with a fullness that is essentially the only undamaged thing about him. The love works. Everything else is broken or bent or leaking, but the love works. There is an episode, one of the most celebrated in the series, where Homer discovers that he has a crayon lodged in his brain, as we discussed. And when he becomes intelligent, he writes a report about the nuclear plant that is so accurate and so damning that it has the potential to shut Burns down. The intelligent Homer understands the system. He can see it, he can document it, he can potentially dismantle it. And then Bart gets the report. Bart, who is supposed to be the troublemaker, the rebel, the kid who should want nothing more than to see authority destroyed, takes the report and burns it. Because Bart looked at the intelligent version of his father and saw that this version was unhappy. That the clear-eyed Homer who could see the truth was also the Homer who was suffering from the truth. And Bart could not bear it. Bart made a choice, without understanding the full implications of it, to protect his father's happiness at the cost of his father's clarity. Bart burned the report because he loves Homer. Because for all of his rebellion and his troublemaking and his deliberate performance of not caring, Bart Simpson has a profound and protective love for his father. And that love expressed itself, in that moment, as the choice to keep his father in comfortable darkness rather than painful light. This is not a funny moment. Dressed up as a funny moment, surrounded by funny moments, yes. But the thing it is actually about is the specific love of a child for a parent and the specific tragedy of a child understanding that the truth might break the parent they love. Homer's relationship with beer deserves its own paragraph because it functions in the same way the food does, but with a different quality of desperation to it. Homer drinks the way people drink when they are running from something that has no name because giving it a name would mean confronting it. He drinks at Moe's, which is less a bar than a support group for men who are not doing well and have agreed, silently and collectively, to not say so out loud. The bar is warm, the beer is cold, Moe is there, Barney is there, lost in his own fog of anesthetic. And Homer sinks into this environment with a relief that is too profound to be about alcohol. Moe's Tavern is where Homer goes to not be in his own head for a while. It is where the noise turns down. It is where nobody needs anything from him. It is where he is not a father, or a husband, or a safety inspector, or a son. He is just Homer, and Homer can have a beer, and for a few hours the gap between who he is and who he should be closes to a manageable distance. The show treats Moe's as a comedy location, a recurring set piece, a vehicle for Moe's misanthropy and Barney's particular pathos. But it is also a place where Homer goes to survive his own life. And the show knows this. In the quieter episodes, the ones where the spotty drops back and something more earnest fills its place, you can see exactly what Moe's is for Homer. It is a refuge, a place where he is accepted as is, limitations and failures and all, without the daily reminder that he is not quite enough. Homer deserves more than a running gag. Homer deserves more than a punchline. And the beautiful, aching thing about The Simpsons at its best is that the show knows this and keeps showing it to you between the jokes, in the spaces where the comedy breathes. Homer Simpson is a man with a damaged brain, a wounded heart, a childhood defined by loss, an adulthood defined by limitations he did not choose, and a love for his family that operates at full capacity even when every other system is failing. He is not funny. He is human. He is the most human character on the show, which is saying something in a cast full of humans, because his particular humanity is the kind that does not get cleaned up for television. It is unmediated. It is imperfect. It is sitting on the couch at 742 Evergreen Terrace every Sunday night, eating a donut he does not need, watching television he is not fully processing, in a house he is lucky to still be living in, and being quietly, stubbornly, improbably happy. Because Homer is happy. That is the final detail, and it matters enormously. For all the damage, for all the loss, for all the limitations and failures and jokes at his expense, Homer Simpson is a fundamentally happy person. He experiences joy with a directness and a completeness that his more sophisticated neighbors cannot manage. He tastes the donut fully. He laughs at the television with his whole body. He falls asleep on the couch in the specific way of someone who is completely at ease in their own home. And this happiness, this specific, unearned, unjustified, beautiful happiness of a man who has every reason to be miserable and mostly is not. This is the show's greatest argument against the idea that intelligence and awareness are prerequisites for a good life. Homer is happy because he loves what he has. He loves his family. He loves his beer. He loves his television and his couch and his donuts and his town, such as it is. He loves with a completeness that the smarter characters around him, Lisa, Burns, Sideshow Bob, anyone who has dedicated their life to being right, never quite manage. Homer's happiness is not earned. It is not deserved. It is not logical given his circumstances. It is simply there. Like the sun. Like Santa's little helper climbing into his lap. Like Marge appearing at the kitchen door to call him for dinner. Simply, stubbornly, impossibly there. The most damaged character on the show is also the happiest. And if that is not a thesis statement about the nature of human resilience and the specific mercy of limited self-awareness, I do not know what is. Homer's brain is a map of damage. Every region of it has been marked by something that went wrong. The crayon, the radiation, the mother who vanished, the father who lied, the employer who used him, the town that poisoned him. And yet, underneath all of that, sitting in the part of the brain that was there before any of the damage, is the capacity to love his family. And that capacity is untouched. It has survived everything. It glows in the dark. Homer looks at Marge, and something in his brain that has been broken in every other way still functions perfectly. He looks at his children, and the damaged machinery of his mind produces something that works exactly as intended. That is what the show is about. Not the jokes, not the gags, not the celebrity appearances in the Treehouse of Horror specials and the couch gags. The show is about the part of Homer Simpson that still works. And the wonder of it, the thing that keeps people watching for 36 years, is that the part of Homer that still works is the most important part. He can barely function in the world, but he can love his family. And love, the show has been insisting from the beginning, is enough. Not comfortable, not easy, not clean, not always reciprocal in the ways it deserves to be, but enough. Section 3. Marge, the architecture of endurance. There is a scene in one of the early seasons. You may remember it. Marge is standing at the kitchen sink, washing dishes that do not need washing, because she has already washed them once and she needed something to do with her hands. The house is quiet. The children are in bed. Homer is asleep on the couch with the television still on, the blue light of it flickering across his face. And Marge stands at the sink and washes dishes, and the camera just holds on her face for a moment. No joke. No punchline. No setup for the next scene. Just Marge standing at the sink with an expression that is not quite sad and not quite content and not quite anything that has a name. An expression that anyone who has ever loved someone imperfectly and been loved back imperfectly and kept showing up anyway will recognize from the inside. That expression is the Marge Simpson show. Everything else is context. Let us talk about who Marge actually is, which requires, first, talking about who she was supposed to be. Marge Bouvier grew up in Springfield, the middle daughter of a household defined by a specific kind of petite bourgeois aspiration. Her father was a flight attendant who wanted to be something bigger. Her mother was a woman of strong opinions and limited horizons, the kind of mother who loves you completely and suffocates you gently and means well with every breath of it. Her sisters, Patty and Selma, are the most vivid supporting evidence for what Marge could have become if she had made different choices. Two women who aged into their disappointments and wear them as a kind of armor, whose love for their sister is genuine and whose contempt for her husband is equally genuine and not entirely unjustified. The young Marge had ambitions. The show has revisited her youth across a dozen episodes, each one showing a different version of her early life because the floating timeline demands it. But through all the versions, certain things remain consistent. Marge was bright. Marge was capable of more than Springfield offered her. Marge had an artistic sensibility that the show depicts in her adult life, primarily through painting. A talent she has demonstrated and abandoned and returned to across 3 decades, each return a small reminder that there is a person in there who has not been entirely consumed by the role she plays. Marge met Homer in high school. This is, in its various retellings, always the same story at its emotional core. She was drawn to him. Not in spite of who he was, but because of it. Because Homer's chaos and his warmth and his absolute unself-conscious directness was the specific opposite of the careful, managed, performance of propriety world she had grown up in. Homer was real in a way that made Marge feel real when she was with him. And that is the beginning of everything. Marge chose Homer. This is the most important fact about her character, and it is a fact that sometimes gets buried under the weight of everything she endures because of the choice. She was not trapped. She was not naive. She was not rescued from a better life by a man who was not good enough for her. She looked at Homer Simpson, this specific, chaotic, warm, damaged, funny, infuriating, lovable man, and she chose him, deliberately, with full knowledge of what she was choosing, or as much knowledge as any young person can have about what they are choosing. And here's the thing about that choice, the thing the show has been slowly, carefully, deliberately unpacking for 36 years. The choice to love someone is not a static act. It is not something you do once and then have. It is something you do continuously in every small decision, in every moment where you could leave and you don't. In every morning you wake up beside the same person and recommit to the reality you have built together. Marge renews her choice to love Homer approximately every 40 minutes of screen time. She does it when she puts the blanket over him on the couch. She does it when she defends him to her sisters, who are never wrong about his failings and never right about what he deserves for them. She does it when she stands in the kitchen at 10 o'clock at night, making a plate of food for him because he will be hungry and she knows this about him, and so she feeds him. She does it when she listens to him describe a problem she could solve in 30 seconds and lets him work through it himself because she understands intuitively and without being told that he needs to get there on his own. Marge is the most emotionally intelligent character on the show. Not the most conventionally intelligent, that is Lisa, unambiguously. But emotional intelligence is a different thing, And Marge possesses it in quantities that the show consistently underplays because the show is funnier when Marge is slightly baffled by the chaos around her than when she is demonstrating the full depth of her capacity to read and respond to the people she loves. But watch the quiet moments. Watch what Marge does in the pauses between the plot. Watch the way she positions herself in a room relative to the people in it. Watch the way she responds to her children, not with the loud, obvious responses that the episodes foreground, but with the small adjustments and the small attentions and the small offerings that the camera sometimes catches and sometimes doesn't. Marge knows her children, not in the general way that parents can claim to know their children. She knows them specifically. She knows that Bart's troublemaking is a performance, and that underneath the performance is a boy who is desperate to be seen clearly and is terrified of what might happen if someone actually looks. She knows that Lisa's composure is constructed over a foundation of loneliness that runs deeper than anything Lisa can fully articulate. She knows that Maggie sees everything and processes everything and is waiting, with a patience that is almost eerie in a one-year-old, for the moment, to reveal what she has made of all of it. Marge knows these things and she carries them the way she carries everything, without complaint, without requiring credit, without ever making the children feel the weight of how much she is holding on their behalf. This is not a minor thing. This is the central act of the show if you are paying attention. Every episode of The Simpsons, regardless of what the plot says it is ultimately about the family surviving. And the family surviving is, more than anything else, the result of Marge's continuous, unacknowledged, invisible labor. Not just the cooking and the cleaning, though those are real and extensive. The emotional labor. The work of keeping 5 people connected to each other when the force is pulling them apart. Homer's impulsiveness, Bart's rebellion, Lisa's alienation, Maggie's silence, the town's collective dysfunction, are constant and strong. Marge is the load-bearing wall of the Simpson household. Remove her and the structure collapses. Not immediately, maybe, but inevitably. Homer cannot hold the family together without her. He does not have the tools. He has the love, but not the infrastructure, and love without infrastructure is just good intentions piled in the corner of a room that is slowly losing its shape. The show acknowledges this in the episodes where Marge leaves or is removed from the household for any reason. These episodes have a specific quality to them, a controlled anxiety that runs beneath whatever comedy the plot is offering. Homer tries. He always tries. And he fails, not because he does not care, but because he cannot do what Marge does. He cannot see the small things that need tending. He cannot feel the emotional temperature of the room and adjust accordingly. He cannot be simultaneously everything the family needs him to be. Marge does this every day. She has been doing it for 36 years. And the show celebrates this in its way, but it also shows you something darker underneath the celebration. Marge pays a price for being the person who holds everything together. The price is that nobody holds her. This is the most understated tragedy in The Simpsons, and it is so understated that you can watch 100 episodes without it fully surfacing. But it is there. In the quiet scenes. In the moments when the camera finds her alone. In the way she stands at the kitchen sink washing dishes that do not need washing. Who holds Marge? Homer loves her. This is real, and the show never lets you forget it. Homer's love for Marge is one of the most consistent and genuine things in the entire series. It is not always expressed well. It is not always expressed at the right moment or in the right form. But it is there, and it is substantial, and in the episodes where it is brought to the surface, the anniversary episodes, the episodes where Homer almost loses her and suddenly understands in full what her presence means, it is genuinely moving. But Homer's love for Marge is not the same thing as Homer seeing Marge. And Marge, for all her capacity to see the people she loves, is herself not often seen. Her sisters see her, but they see her as someone who made a mistake and has been living with the consequences. And their love is the love of people who want to protect her from her own choices. It is not the love she needs. Her children need her. They are not able at their ages and in their stages of development to give back what she gives. This is how it should be. Children are not supposed to hold their parents. But it means that Marge is pouring out continuously and being replenished only partially and only intermittently. The friends she Helen Lovejoy, Luann Van Houten, the other mothers of Springfield. These relationships are depicted as sources of mild comedy and occasional genuine warmth, but they exist in a social ecosystem defined by performance and competition, and the specific cruelty of women who have been taught that the best evidence of their own good choices is the poor choices of other women. Marge's friendships, such as they are, give her a social context, but not a safe container for the things she actually carries. And so Marge stands at the kitchen sink, and the camera holds on her face, and she has an expression that has no name. Now, let us talk about the specific forms that Marge's endurance takes, because they are various and they are instructive. The hair. Let us spend a moment on the hair, because the hair is doing something the show has never fully articulated, but that has always been there for anyone who thinks about it. Marge's tower of blue hair is impossible. We know this. It is one of the many physical impossibilities that the show uses as a visual joke. But within the show's own logic, within the universe where this is simply how Marge looks, the hair is a choice. She maintains it this way. She has always maintained it this way. It is, in some sense, the most visible external statement of who Marge is. The hair is controlled. The hair is tall. The hair is maintained at exactly the same height and shape regardless of what is happening around her. Hurricanes in Springfield. Nuclear near misses. The complete dissolution of local government. Marge's hair remains. This is funny. And it is also a portrait of a woman who uses visible, physical, specific control over one thing in her life as a way of managing the absolute lack of control over everything else. The hair stays up because the family will not. The hair stays shaped because the days will not. The hair is perfect because something has to be. Marge's relationship with her own anxiety deserves careful attention, because the show has documented it across multiple episodes with a specificity that suggests the writers understood anxiety from the inside. There is the gambling addiction episode, which is one of the more surprising things The Simpsons ever did. Not because Marge having an addiction is surprising, the show has given almost every character an addiction at one point or another, but because the show treated it with the full seriousness it deserved. Marge's gambling is not a joke. It is a portrait of a woman finding, for the first time, something that is only hers. Something that is exciting and immediate and personal, and that does not require her to be responsible or careful or good. Something that gives her the jolt of aliveness that domestic routine has slowly leached away. The gambling is a symptom. The symptom is longing. The longing is for a self that exists outside of the wife and the mother and the homemaker. A Marge who is just Marge in a room full of noise and lights and possibility, with no one needing anything from her. The show pulls her back from this. It must. The family structure requires it. And Marge, because she is Marge, accepts this because she loves her family, and her family is real and the casino is not. But the episode leaves a residue, a trace of something the show usually does not examine directly. The evidence that Marge's contentment has limits, that beneath the blue hair and the smile and the extraordinary competence of her daily performance, there is a woman who sometimes, in the quiet moments, wonders what she might have been if she had been allowed to find out. She does not let herself wonder for long. This is also part of her character, the way she closes the wondering off and returns to the task at hand. The way the practical, capable present. Marge steps forward, and the wondering, longing Marge steps back. But the wondering is there. The show has shown it to you. Marge's artistic life is the clearest expression of this other self. When she paints, something happens to her that the show depicts with quiet reverence. She is focused in a way she rarely is elsewhere. She is pleased with herself in a way that is different from the satisfaction of running the household well. More private, more personal, more hers. The paintings are technically competent and emotionally expressive in ways that suggest Marge has a rich inner life that she has never quite found a way to share. The show gives her the painting and then takes it away, again and again. The talent is discovered, celebrated briefly, and then returned to the background because the foreground demands her. And each time, Marge accepts this without resentment and without complaint because she is Marge, and this is what she does. But the painting is there. The paintings are there. Small canvases of color and feeling stacked in the back of the garage or leaning against a wall in the basement. Evidence of the interior life of a woman who has no other way to make it visible. Marge is an artist who never had time to find out what kind of artist she would have been. She is a woman of substantial intelligence who was born into a moment and a place and a social context that did not have a path for her particular combination of traits and abilities. She is the kind of person who, in a different decade or a different town or a different marriage, might have become something that would have made her unambiguously happy. Instead, she became the best possible version of the role she chose, and the show honors that, mostly and occasionally, briefly, shows you what it costs. And here's the final thing about Marge, the thing that the show saves for its most honest moments, the thing that cannot be said in a joke or communicated in the warm tuba music that underscores the happy endings. Marge is lonely. Not chronically, not catastrophically. She has a family who loves her and a life that is full and a marriage that is real even when it is difficult. But there is a specific loneliness that belongs to people who are unusually perceptive, who can see clearly what the people around them feel and need and are, and who are not, themselves, seen with equal clarity. Marge sees Homer. She sees Bart. She sees Lisa. She sees Maggie. She sees them with a depth and an accuracy that the show periodically demonstrates, and that each of them would confirm if asked. But does anyone see Marge? Does Homer see the woman standing at the kitchen sink? Does he see the paintings in the garage? Does he understand, in his impaired and loving way, what it costs her to be what she is for this family every day? Sometimes, in flashes, in the episodes where the show strips away the comedy and lets him see her. Those moments are real, and they are tender, and they are enough to keep the marriage viable. But not always, not consistently. Marge is a person who built her life around the needs of the people she loves, and who is loved enormously in return, and who is not quite as known as she deserves to be. This is not a complaint about Homer. Homer cannot help what he cannot see. The damage that limits his perception also limits the quality of his love. Not the intensity, but the precision. He loves her completely. He understands her incompletely. And she has made peace with this because she loves him, and because he is trying, and because peace is what the family needs. She stands at the kitchen sink. She washes the dishes that do not need washing. She has an expression with no name. And then she turns off the light and goes to check that all the doors are locked, and all the children are sleeping, and everything is where it should be, and then she goes to bed in the room she shares with Homer. And she chooses him again. And the house holds. Marge Simpson is the architecture of endurance. She is the structure that makes the family possible. She is the wall that everything leans against without knowing it is leaning. She is the quiet center of a very loud show, the still point around which everything else rotates. And she is not a comedy character. She is a person. She is a person who loved someone imperfectly and been loved back imperfectly and kept showing up anyway, every single day for 36 years. And that is not funny. That is everything. Section 4. Bart Simpson and the Weight of Being Alive. Bart Simpson should have been the main character. This is not a widely discussed thing, but it is true, and the evidence for it is sitting right in the show's title. The Simpsons. The family. Not Homer's show, not Marge's show, the family's show. And in the early conception of the series, in the cultural moment when the show first emerged and first made its specific kind of noise in the world, Bart was the center of gravity. He was the icon. He was the t-shirt. He was the catchphrase and the attitude and the energy that the show radiated into the culture at the end of the 1980s. Eat my shorts. Don't have a cow. Ay caramba. Bart was the voice of a generation that did not want to be told what to do, and the generation loved him for it, and he was on every piece of merchandise and every lunchbox and every poster, and for a moment he was the most famous cartoon character in America. And then something happened. Not dramatically, not all at once. But the show shifted its center of gravity. Homer became the protagonist. Bart became a supporting character in his own family. And the cultural conversation about The Simpsons shifted with it, from the show about the rebellious kid to the show about the bumbling dad. Why? The official answer is that Homer was funnier, that the writers found more material in Homer's limitless capacity for failure than in Bart's delinquency. And this is true in a craft sense. Homer is a more flexible comic engine. His idiocy can be applied to any situation. His failures scale up and down without limit. But there is an unofficial answer, a more interesting one, and it lives in the specific quality of what Bart was doing on the show at its most honest. Bart was too real. Bart, underneath the catchphrases and the skateboard and the performance of not caring, was a portrait of a specific kind of childhood pain that the show could not quite figure out how to center without becoming something much darker than a Sunday night animated comedy. Bart Simpson is 10 years old and he is angry. Not silly angry, not cartoon angry, not the comfortable, performed naughtiness of a sitcom child who exists to be corrected by his parents and learn a lesson. Bart is angry in the specific way of a child who has looked at the world and found it insufficient and does not yet have the vocabulary to name what is wrong. He acts out because acting out is the only language available to him. He makes trouble because troublemaking is the only form of power a 10-year-old boy can exercise. He refuses to conform because conforming would require believing that the system of school and rules and grades and expectations is worth conforming to. And something in Bart, something sharp and perceptive and not entirely wrong, does not believe this. The show has been careful, across 3 decades, to make clear that Bart is not stupid. He is not. His grades are bad. His academic performance is consistently disastrous. He has been threatened with being held back a year multiple times, and has occasionally been held back, in fact. He fails tests, he does not do homework. He does not, in any measurable academic sense, succeed. But watch what Bart does when he is interested in something. Watch the episode where he becomes the manager of Homer's barbershop quartet and demonstrates a natural talent for reading a room and managing personalities and navigating the music industry that no 10-year-old should have. Watch the episode where he becomes a chess champion. Not through study or preparation, but through the specific quality of his spatial intelligence and his willingness to take risks. Watch what happens when Bart applies himself to anything that he has decided, on his own terms, is worth his time. He is extraordinary. Bart's academic failure is not evidence of low intelligence. It is evidence of motivated intelligence. A mind that is capable of high performance but refuses to deploy that capability on behalf of systems it does not respect or problems it does not care about. This is, incidentally, the description of a large percentage of the most talented people in any given generation. The ones who failed school and went on to be remarkable at the things that mattered to them. The ones whose intelligence expressed itself sideways, unexpectedly, in forms that the educational system had no category for. Bart is one of these people. The show knows this. It has always known this. And it has consistently depicted his intelligence in ways that complicate the surface reading of him as the dumb troublemaker kid. But Bart's intelligence is not the most important thing about him. The most important thing about him is his heart. This is not a sentence you hear often about Bart Simpson. It sounds wrong somehow. Bart is not a sentimental character. He does not wear his feelings on his outside. He does not give speeches about caring. He does not, as a matter of consistent character behavior, express vulnerability in ways that are comfortable or clean. But the heart is there in the very specific way that hearts are present in people who have learned that expressing them directly is not safe. Bart learned early that showing what you care about gives other people leverage over you. That the teachers who know you want to pass their class have power over you. That the bullies who know you are afraid of them have power over you. That even your own father, who loves you, who means well, whose impairment is not his fault, cannot always be trusted to handle what you give him with care. So Bart does not give things directly. He gives them sideways. He gives them in the form of action rather than statement. He protects Lisa without admitting he is protecting her. He saves Homer without letting Homer know how much the saving cost him. He performs not caring with enough conviction that most people believe the performance. Most people. Not all. Lisa knows. Of course Lisa knows. The relationship between Bart and Lisa is one of the finest things The Simpsons has ever done, and it is fine precisely because it is so honest about what it is. The relationship between two very different people who understand each other more completely than either of them can admit out loud. They fight. They insult each other. They compete and undermine, and in the broad strokes of the show's comedy, seem to actively dislike each other at regular intervals. And in the quiet moments, in the episodes that drop the comedy and go somewhere more honest, they are each other's only real peer in the family. The only other person who has grown up in the same house with the same parents, shaped by the same forces, who can be handed half a reference and finish it without explanation. Bart loves Lisa with a specific ferocity that he expresses almost exclusively through protective action. When Lisa is bullied, Bart responds, not with a speech about how bullying is wrong, with his fists or his wits or whatever is available. He makes it stop. He does not explain why. She knows why. And Lisa loves Bart with a specific ache that she expresses almost exclusively through worry. She worries about him because she can see the trajectory of his choices and where they lead, and she cares too much to be comfortable with it. The worry is love. He knows it is love. He pretends it is nagging. She pretends it is worry. They both know what it is. Now let us talk about Bart's relationship with his father, which is where the real emotional gravity of his character lives. Homer forgets Bart's name sometimes. This is a joke. It is also, if you let yourself sit with it, a genuinely cruel thing for a father to do, even accidentally, even as a result of brain damage and cognitive impairment, and the genuine impossibility of Homer's neurological situation. A child whose father cannot reliably remember his name is a child who has been given very specific information about where he falls in the hierarchy of his father's attention. Bart acts up. He always acts up. And the question the show never asks directly but keeps asking indirectly is what would happen to Bart's behavior if Homer saw him clearly, consistently, without the impairment and the distraction and the endless comedy of Homer's failing attention? What would Bart become if his father looked at him and remembered what he was seeing? The episodes that answer this question are the most heartbreaking in the series. There is an episode where Homer teaches Bart to drive. There is an episode where Homer and Bart bond over a mutual project, something physical and requiring sustained attention, and Homer manages to stay present for it. And Bart opens up in ways he almost never opens up. There are scattered episodes where the Homer-Bart relationship achieves something like its potential, where the warmth between them surfaces and both of them are briefly, visibly happy. And then the reset, and Homer is back to not remembering, and Bart is back to acting up. The pattern is the cruelest thing about it. Not the forgetting, but the remembering and then the forgetting again. The way hope keeps getting created and then withdrawn. The way Bart has learned not to trust the good moments, because the good moments do not persist. This is the specific experience of a child with a parent whose availability is inconsistent. More damaging in some ways than consistent absence, because inconsistent presence teaches the child that the good thing is real but unreliable, which is worse than learning that the good thing is simply not there. Inconsistent availability trains hope and then punishes it, over and over, until the child stops hoping as a protective measure. Bart has stopped hoping for consistent attention from his father. What he has instead is love. Big, messy, imperfect, unreliable love. Love that shows up late and gets the important details wrong, and falls asleep at the wrong moment, and does not always remember your name. But love. And Bart has decided, somewhere in his 10 years of being alive, that this love is enough. Not because it is enough, because it is what is available. Because Homer is his father, and this is the father he has. And the alternative, which would be to stop loving Homer, to stop needing him, to achieve the emotional independence that would make the forgetting hurt less, the alternative is too costly. Bart would rather keep getting hurt than stop caring. This is brave. It is genuinely brave in the specific way that choosing vulnerability over self-protection is always brave. It is also very 10 years old. Because children do not always have access to the protective detachment that adults develop to survive their parents' limitations. They love too directly, too completely, with too little distance. Bart loves Homer too directly, too completely, with too little distance. And Homer loves Bart back with exactly the same quality. Too directly, too completely, too much in the present tense, without the kind of sustained, structured attention that Bart needs. They are improbably well matched. Two people who love in the same key, who cannot give each other what they need, who keep trying anyway. The skateboard deserves a moment, because the skateboard is Bart's most persistent symbol, and it is doing more work than it appears to. The skateboard is freedom. It is the physical expression of Bart's most fundamental need: to move, to go somewhere, to not be still, to have access to the outside world in a form that his own body can produce at will. When Bart is on the skateboard, he is not a student who fails tests. He is not the son of an employee who cannot remember his name. He is not the brother who is not as smart as his sister. He is not any of the versions of himself that the institutional world has decided he is. He is moving. He is in control. He is going somewhere. The skateboard is Bart's escape route and his identity and his most truthful self-expression. And the show understands this. The episodes that take the skateboard seriously, that use it to tell you something true about Bart rather than just as a sight gag, always use it to show you the version of him that is free. Bart on the skateboard is the version of Bart that the rest of the world does not get to see. He is 10 years old. He has been 10 years old for 36 years. And in those 36 years of being 10, he has faced more genuine moral complexity than most adult characters in any show ever produced. He has had to navigate loyalty and betrayal, authority and rebellion, love and disappointment, cruelty and grace, the specific terror of being seen clearly by the wrong people and not being seen at all by the right ones. He does this without the vocabulary for it, without the adult capacity for emotional processing, with a brain that is still developing and a heart that is fully functional, and the specific, raw bravery of a child who has decided that being alive in this particular family, in this particular town, is worth the cost. There is an episode, Season 2, one of the formative ones, where Bart cheats on a test and then confesses to the whole school and faces the humiliation of public failure rather than living with a success that was not earned. The episode ends with Bart having failed publicly and having been honest about it, and him seeming more at ease with himself than he was at the beginning. He chose failure over fraud. He chose the truth over the comfortable lie. This is not a small thing. For a 10-year-old boy in front of his entire school to choose honesty over self-preservation, that is a significant moral act. And the show treats it as such for an episode, and then the next episode Bart is back to cheating and scheming and acting up, and the lesson has been delivered and withdrawn and everything has reset. But the choice was real. The moment was real. Underneath the delinquent and the troublemaker and the underachiever, there is a person who, when it actually matters, chooses to do the right thing. Not always. Not consistently. But when the stakes are high enough and the choice is clear enough, Bart Simpson chooses well. This is the thing the show has always known about him and almost never forgets, even in the worst episodes, even in the seasons where the writing dips and the character becomes a prop for a plot rather than a person. Even then, occasionally, there's a moment where Bart does the right thing, where the heart that he works so hard to hide makes a decision that the surface character would not make. And in those moments, you see who Bart Simpson actually is. He is a boy who is trying. He is a boy who has been given every reason to stop trying and has not stopped. He is 10 years old, and he has been 10 years old for 36 years, and he has spent every single one of those years trying to matter to a father who loves him and keeps forgetting his name, and excelling at things he has decided are worth excelling at, and protecting a sister who does not always know she needs protecting, and carrying a heart that is larger than his performance of it, and skating fast enough that the world cannot quite catch him. That is Bart Simpson, not the t-shirt, not the catchphrase. The boy underneath it, the weight he carries, the lightness he performs, the love that he guards as if it is a secret. Section 5. Lisa and the Loneliness of Being Right. Lisa Simpson is 8 years old, and she already knows that she is going to spend most of her life being right about things that nobody wants to hear. This is the specific curse of the genuinely perceptive. The people who see clearly, who can identify the problem before it has fully manifested, who can trace the consequence back to the cause and forward to the outcome before anyone else has even registered that something is moving. These people do not generally have an easy time of it. They are right too early. They are right in rooms where being right is unwelcome. They are right in ways that require everyone around them to confront things they would prefer not to confront. And they cannot stop being right. That is the cruelest part. It is not a choice for Lisa. It is not a performance or a bid for attention or a compulsive need to demonstrate superiority. She is right because she cannot see things in any other way. The way her mind works, the particular sharpness and reach of it, means that she arrives at accurate conclusions by default. She cannot missee something. She cannot unsee something once she has seen it. She cannot, in good conscience, be quiet about the things she sees because being quiet would require a kind of moral compromise that is not available to her. Lisa Simpson's intelligence is not separate from her character. It is her character. The way she sees, the depth at which she feels, the reach of her empathy, the ferocity of her ethical commitments, all of these are the same thing. The same quality of mind expressing itself in different directions. And that quality of mind, in Springfield, in the Simpson household, in the specific circumstances of her life, has made her profoundly lonely. Let us be precise about the loneliness, because it is not a simple thing. Lisa is not lonely in the way of someone who has no one. She has a family who loves her. She has a mother who sees her with real clarity and supports her with real dedication. She has a brother who protects her with an intensity he would never admit to. She has occasional friends. The show has given her Janie and Richard and other peripheral companions. And occasional mentors, teachers who recognize what she is, view, and respond to it with the specific reverence that genuinely exceptional students inspire in good teachers. She is not isolated, but she is not connected in the way she needs to be connected. There is a quality of being known that she cannot find in Springfield. The kind of knowing where someone understands the full spectrum of who you are. Not just the intelligence, but the feeling. Not just the competence, but the ache. Not just the 8-year-old who plays the saxophone, but the person inside that 8-year-old who is already, at 8, carrying the awareness of her own difference like a stone. The saxophone is the most important detail about Lisa Simpson. More important than the IQ. More important than the good grades. More important even than the moral courage she demonstrates in episode after episode, the willingness to stand up and say the true thing when everyone around her is invested in the comfortable lie. More important than any of that is the saxophone. Because the saxophone is the place where Lisa's intelligence and her feeling meet and produce something that does not require explanation or justification or defense. The saxophone is the place where being right becomes irrelevant, where the specific curse of her perception is suspended, where she is not the smartest person in the room or the loneliest person in the room, but simply a person making music. The saxophone is Lisa's connection to something larger than Springfield. When she plays, she is connected to all of the music that has ever been played, to all of the people who have ever found this same relief in this same channel, to a tradition of feeling expressed through sound that goes back centuries and forward into a future she is already, at 8, dimly aware she is heading toward. There is an episode where Lisa meets her idol, a jazz musician who turns out to be, in person, deeply disappointing, who turns out to be cynical and self-destructive and a fraction of the person she had constructed from the music. The episode is about the gap between the art and the artist, which is a sophisticated subject for an animated comedy aimed at families. And Lisa navigates it with the specific grief of someone who has discovered that the things she loves can be separate from the people who made them. That the music can be perfect even if the musician is not. That the beauty she found in the sound is real even if the source of it is flawed. This is an adult lesson. Lisa absorbs it at 8. She absorbs it without being destroyed by it, which is itself extraordinary. She mourns the idol she built and retains the music. She separates what she needs from the person who cannot give it and keeps the thing that was always hers. This capacity, to grieve clearly and retain what is real, is one of the most sophisticated things the show ever depicts. And it depicts it in a child, in 8 minutes of animated comedy, in a way that sticks with you long after the credits roll. Now, let us talk about Lisa's relationship with her family, because it is where the show does its most quietly devastating work. Lisa and Homer. The complexity here is enormous, and the show has handled it with more nuance than it gets credit for. Homer does not understand Lisa. This is not a secret, not a critique, not a failure he is ashamed of. It is simply a fact about the relationship between a father whose IQ is 55 and a daughter whose IQ is almost certainly approaching genius level. They do not have natural access to each other. The conversation that comes easily between Lisa and her intelligence community, the other people who can keep up with her, is simply not available with Homer. And yet, Homer loves Lisa with a specific tenderness that the show depicts more carefully than it depicts almost anything else. He does not understand her, but he loves her. He cannot follow her arguments, but he tries. He falls asleep when she reads to him, but he listens for as long as he can. He gets the details wrong when he tries to support her, the wrong kind of support, at the wrong moment, in the wrong form. But the intention underneath the error is real. And Lisa knows this. Lisa, who is right about almost everything, is right about this too. She knows that her father loves her even when his love is imprecise. She knows that his attempts to connect, however clumsy, are genuine attempts. And she meets him where he is, in the episodic way of the show, with a patient forgiveness that costs her something, and that she gives anyway because he is her father and his heart is good even when his brain is not. The most celebrated Homer-Lisa moment in the series is from the episode where Homer takes Lisa to a father-daughter dance. Everything goes wrong, the logistics fail, Homer is Homer. But at the end, there is a moment, brief, quiet, free of jokes, where Homer and Lisa are simply together. And the quality of their togetherness in that moment is the specific quality of two people who cannot fully reach each other and keep trying anyway. The show does not editorialize. It just shows you. And what it shows you is more moving than anything it could have said directly, because what it shows you is the truth about love between people who are fundamentally different. Not the romantic version where love bridges all gaps. The honest version where the gap is real and the love is real, and both things exist at the same time and neither negates the other. Homer cannot be the father Lisa needs at a cognitive level. He is the father Lisa has at a love level. And somehow, in the specific economy of this family, that is enough to build a relationship on. Lisa and Marge. This is the relationship that gets the least screen time relative to its depth, which is its own comment on how the show works. Marge and Lisa understand each other in ways that neither of them can quite articulate. They are not the same person. The differences between them are real, and the show has always been honest about them. Marge is intuitive and practical and domestically focused, and Lisa is intellectual and idealistic and fundamentally oriented toward the large world beyond Springfield. They want different things, they approach life from different angles, but they recognize each other. There is a scene, one of many, scattered across 3 decades, where Marge and Lisa have a conversation that moves in about 30 seconds from something superficial to something completely real. And you can see in both of them the specific relief of being understood by someone who does not require explanation. Marge sees Lisa's loneliness. Lisa sees Marge's endurance. They give each other, in these moments, the recognition that is hardest to find elsewhere. Marge is also, in some ways, a cautionary figure for Lisa. Not intentionally, not cruelly, but structurally. Marge is what happens when a woman of substantial gifts makes a certain kind of choice, and Lisa is aware of this. Lisa has watched her mother, this perceptive, capable, artistically gifted woman, subordinate herself to the family, to the house, to the endless round of care and maintenance that keeps the household functional. And Lisa loves her mother. But she is also watching. She is taking notes. She is building, at 8 years old, a picture of what choices lead to what lives, and she is already making decisions about the life she wants. This is not a criticism of Marge. Lisa does not see it as a criticism of Marge. But it is a reckoning, a quiet, ongoing reckoning with the cost of certain kinds of love. Lisa and Bart. We touched on this in the previous section, but let us look at it from Lisa's side. Bart is Lisa's adversary and her safety net. He is the person who picks on her and the person who protects her, and both of these are true simultaneously because that is how siblings work when they actually love each other. The picking on is a form of intimacy. The fact that he can bother her, that he knows exactly what to say to make her react, is evidence of how well he knows her. The protection is the love underneath, occasionally surfacing. From Lisa's perspective, Bart is the reminder that intelligence is not the only form of capability. She watches him navigate social situations with an ease she cannot match. She watches him read rooms and people with a precision that is different from, but not inferior to her own. She watches him be charismatic in the way that the school rewards, not in the grade sense, but in the human sense, in the sense of being surrounded by people, of mattering socially in a way that her own distinction does not give her. Lisa is lonely in her excellence. Bart is popular in his failure. And they exist in the same family, in adjacent bedrooms, looking at each other's lives with a mixture of incomprehension and envy that neither of them would ever admit to. They are, in the end, the two poles of the same family, the underperformer and the overachiever, the rebel and the idealist, the one who has learned to protect himself by not caring, and the one who has never learned to protect herself from caring too much. And they need each other. Not in the way the show sometimes sentimentalizes it, with the warm music and the explicit statement of sibling love. They need each other in the way that opposites define each other. They need each other the way you need the person who shows you what you are by being consistently the opposite. Now, the saxophone, again, because it cannot be said just once. Lisa plays jazz. Not pop, not classical, not the cheerful, accessible music that an 8-year-old in a cartoon would be expected to play. Jazz. The music of improvisation and complexity and feeling, expressed through a structure that is both strict and free. The music that requires you to know the rules completely before you can break them with authority. The music that sounds like it is being discovered in the moment of its playing, even when it is the product of years of study and craft. Lisa plays jazz because jazz is the only form of music that can hold everything she is. The intelligence and the feeling and the improvisation and the longing and the precision, jazz requires all of these simultaneously. Jazz is the art form for people who cannot simplify themselves. She is 8 years old and she plays an instrument designed for adults, and she plays it with a feeling that suggests she has been carrying the weight that usually requires decades to accumulate. Where does an 8-year-old get that weight? She got it from being right in a world that does not want to be right. She got it from loving a family that loves her back imperfectly. She got it from being the smartest person in every room she enters and knowing that being the smartest person does not protect you from being hurt by the ordinary things, the unglamorous human things, the things that no intelligence can think its way around. She got it from growing up in Springfield. Lisa Simpson is 8 years old and she is already in mourning for a self that could have been, for a world that could have been, for a version of her family and her town and her life in which her particular combination of capacities was not a source of isolation, but of connection. She plays the saxophone at her window in the late evening, when the light is going and the neighborhood is quiet, and the music goes out into the air over Springfield and disperses. And nobody hears it who fully understands it, except maybe Maggie. Maggie hears everything, but we will get to Maggie. For now, what matters is the music. The music is real. The feeling in it is real. The loneliness that generates it is real. Lisa Simpson is not a comedy character. She is the emotional center of the show, the character through whom all of the show's most serious arguments about intelligence and isolation and the specific suffering of exceptional people in ordinary circumstances are expressed. She is funny sometimes. The show gives her funny moments, and she takes them with grace. But she is not fundamentally funny. She is fundamentally sad in the specific way of people who can see too clearly and feel too deeply and are stuck somewhere that cannot quite hold them. And the saxophone carries all of it. Every episode, every year, every season, the music goes out the window into the Springfield air. And Springfield does not fully understand it. And Lisa plays on. Section 6, The Hidden Economy of Springfield. Let us talk about money. Not in the way the show talks about money, as a running joke about Homer's inadequate salary and Marge's heroic budget management, and the way the family seems to vacillate between poverty and comfort, depending on what the plot requires. Let us talk about the real economic structure of Springfield, the one the show has been documenting across 36 years with a consistency that suggests the writers understood, at a deep level, what they were depicting. Springfield is a company town. This is not a metaphor. This is the specific economic designation for a community whose entire economic life is organized around and dependent on a single employer. The mill town, the coal town, the factory town. The places where one company owns not just the primary industry, but through the wages it pays and the spending those wages generate, essentially everything else in the local economy as well. The grocery store, the bar, the school, the church, all of these exist because the company's workers need them. And the company's workers need them because the company employs them. And the company employs them because the company needs their labor. And the company needs their labor to generate the profits that allow the company to continue paying the wages that sustain the community that depends on the wages. It is a closed loop. And in closed loops, power does not distribute. It concentrates. Charles Montgomery Burns is the power. He owns the nuclear power plant, which employs a substantial portion of Springfield's working population, which generates the economic activity that sustains the town's other businesses, which collectively constitute the tax base that funds the town's schools and infrastructure and services, all of which are inadequate, all of which exist in a state of permanent underfunding, all of which depend on the plant continuing to operate and employing the workers who pay the taxes. Burns is the economy, not a part of it, the whole thing, or close enough to the whole thing that the distinction barely matters. And this means that every single civic decision in Springfield runs through Burns before it reaches the public. Not through a formal process, not through declared graft or obvious corruption, but through the simpler and more durable mechanism of dependence. You do not vote against the man who employs the people whose wages support your business. You do not speak against the company whose tax revenues fund your children's school. You do not investigate the nuclear plant that provides the electricity in your home. The show has depicted this not as a grand conspiracy, but as an ordinary condition, as the mundane texture of life in a community where the power structure is this simple and this complete. Mayor Quimby is corrupt, yes, and the corruption is occasionally foregrounded as comedy. But underneath the comedy is the unremarkable reality of a politician who serves the interests of the community's dominant economic force, because that is the easiest and most survivable way to hold office. Chief Wiggum is incompetent, yes, and the incompetence is a sustained source of comedy. But underneath the comedy is a police force that is not, functionally, set up to investigate or prosecute the kinds of crimes that a man like Burns would commit. The crimes of omission and environmental negligence and regulatory capture that are the actual mechanisms of Burns's power. Wiggum is set up to deal with petty crime and domestic disturbances and the ordinary human misconduct of people who have no resources and no protections. He is not set up to deal with the systematic exploitation of an entire community by its dominant economic actor. This is not an accident. This is a description of how company towns actually function. The school is perhaps the most revealing institution in this regard. Springfield Elementary is underfunded to a degree that the show depicts with a combination of comedy and barely contained outrage. The teachers are underpaid and demoralized, and working with resources that would embarrass a third-world education system. The building is crumbling. The programs are being cut. The children are being educated, in the most generous sense of that word, by a system that exists primarily to warehouse them during the hours when their parents are at work, rather than to prepare them for lives of genuine possibility. And this is fine with Burns. This is, in a very specific sense, exactly what Burns needs. A population that is educated enough to operate the machinery, but not educated enough to question the conditions under which they are operating it. A workforce that can follow instructions but not draft regulations. A town that can read the electricity bill but not understand the rate structure that determines it. The school's underfunding is structural. It is not the result of bad decisions by individual administrators. It is the result of a tax base that is controlled, in its generation and in its assessment, by the interests of the dominant employer, who has every incentive to ensure that the public institutions funded by that base remain insufficient. Burns went to Yale. He has always gone to Yale. Every elite institution in the show's canon, the country club, the exclusive restaurants, the private hospitals, the circles of power where the really consequential decisions get made, is populated by people who, like Burns, were equipped from birth with the specific combination of education and connection and capital that allows you to move through those institutions as a peer rather than a supplicant. Homer went to Springfield's public schools, then to a community college that the show depicts with fond scorn, then into the workforce directly, without the period of network building and credential accumulating that would have given him access to any kind of mobility. Homer and Burns are separated by approximately the same number of miles as they are separated by class. They live in the same town, they breathe the same air, though Burns takes care to ensure the air he breathes is as clean as possible. They are, in the formal sense, employer and employee, with all of the contractual equality that implies. They do not live in the same world. They never have. The comedy of their interactions, Homer's obliviousness, Burns's inability to remember Homer's name, the slapstick of a man with an IQ of 55 interfacing with the machinations of a century-old plutocrat, is funny in the way that the enormous gap between their realities is itself funny, which is to say, it is funny until you stop laughing and notice the gap. The gap is not funny. The gap is Springfield. Let us talk about the other businesses in town because they are each, in their own way, a portrait of economic life at the lower end of a company town's ecosystem. Moe's Tavern. Moe's is the most important secondary business in Springfield, not because it is economically significant, but because of what it represents. Moe's is the place where the working class of Springfield goes to be horizontal for a while, to put down the weight of maintaining a life that is marginally functional at best. To be in the company of other people who are also maintaining marginally functional lives, and who have, by unspoken agreement, decided not to talk about this out loud. Moe is not a happy man. This is established, sustained, and never resolved. Moe has a face that the show has compared unfavorably to various unpleasant things and that he himself seems to regard with a resigned bitterness. He has romantic aspirations that the show regularly defeats. He has ambitions beyond the tavern that he occasionally voices and then retreats from, because the tavern is what he has and what he is good at, and the world outside the tavern has consistently been unkind to him. But Moe's Tavern is a community service, not officially, not charitably, but actually. It is the place where the men of Springfield, and it is, in the show's depiction, primarily men, which is its own comment, come to manage the distance between the lives they are living and the lives they thought they would live. The alcohol is the mechanism, but not the point. The point is the bar. The specific social architecture of the place where you can sit and not have to explain yourself. Homer needs Moe's. Barney needs Moe's. Lenny and Carl need Moe's. These are not weak men who need a crutch. These are men who need, like everyone needs, a place where they can be imperfect and not be judged for it. And in Springfield, a town that has developed a powerful and comprehensive machinery of denial and collective pretense, Moe's is the one place where the pretense drops. You can say true things at Moe's. Not good true things, necessarily, not true things that will help you, but true things. That has value. In a town built on comfortable lies, a place where you can say true things has a specific and underestimated value. The Quick E-Mart. Apu Nahasapima Petalon runs the Quick E-Mart with a dedication that is the show's most complicated comment on the American immigrant experience. He works impossible hours. He manages the store with a precision and a commitment to customer service that is entirely disproportionate to the scale of the business. He has 8 children who appeared in the show as a comic set piece and who represent, in their eightfold simultaneous existence, the specific economic calculation of a man who has bet everything on this country and this store and this life. The Quick E-Mart is open 24 hours. Apu is essentially always there. This is not a joke. This is a portrait of a specific kind of American striving, the immigrant who cannot afford to close, who cannot afford to rest, who has staked too much on this enterprise to give it anything less than everything. The store itself is a monument to the convenience economy, to the way American consumer culture has organized itself around the immediate availability of processed food and cheap goods and the transaction that happens too fast to require any genuine human interaction. The Quick E-Mart is the economic expression of a culture that values availability and speed over quality and relationship, and Apu runs it. He runs it brilliantly, in his way. He memorizes his customers' preferences and family situations, and schedules with a thoroughness that suggests he has made understanding his customers a survival strategy. He invests the transactions with a warmth that the format does not require because he understands, intuitively, that warmth is what keeps people coming back. The Quick E-Mart is not a comedy location. It is a document of economic life at the margins of the service economy. staffed by a person who has made it into something more human than it has any right to be. The Springfield nuclear power plant. This is, of course, the central business, the economic engine, the institution around which the whole town is organized. We will discuss it at length throughout this exploration. For now, the key economic point is this. The plant is outdated, inadequately maintained, and operating on the perpetual edge of a disaster that Burns's wealth and connections have been preventing for decades. The workers who staff it, Mayim, Homer, Lenny, Carl, the various unnamed employees who populate its corridors, are working in conditions that a properly functioning regulatory environment would not permit. They are exposed to levels of radiation that, over a career, would be classified as occupational health hazards of the first order. They are operating machinery that has not been properly serviced because servicing it costs money that Burns prefers to retain. And they know this. On some level, they know this. The show has established that Homer is not the only person at the plant who understands that the conditions are dangerous. The other employees have the same eyes. They can see the cracked cooling towers. They have walked through the room with the glowing waste. But they need the job. This is the essential economic transaction of the company town. You trade your safety and your health and your children's health for a paycheck that is sufficient to maintain the life you have built in the town that exists because of the paycheck. And once you are inside this transaction, it is very difficult to get outside of it. Because the paycheck supports the mortgage, supports the family, supports the life that requires the paycheck. The trap does not require malicious intent to function. It requires only the perfectly ordinary dynamics of people who need income, and a company that provides it, and a town that has no other source. Springfield has no other source. Burns knows this. He has always known this. And his management of this knowledge, the deliberate maintenance of the town's dependency, the calculated refusal to bring the plant up to code, the political contributions that ensure the regulatory environment remains favorable, the long game of keeping Springfield too economically dependent to question what is being done to it. This is not madness or cruelty for its own sake. It is strategy. Burns is not insane. He is not arbitrary. He is one of the most strategically rational characters in the history of television, executing a plan that has been running for over a century with a precision and a patience that no normal human lifespan would accommodate. He bought the power plant. He built the town's dependency. He ensured the workforce remained cognitively impaired through whatever combination of environmental contamination and deliberate miseducation, and maintained poverty served his purposes. He made the deal with Abe Simpson to ensure that Homer, the perfect safety inspector, the one most guaranteed to see nothing, say nothing, fix nothing, would remain in place. And he has watched on from the summit of his fortune as the town has organized itself around the plant and the plant has organized itself around him for decades upon decades until the question of whether Springfield could survive without Burns has become genuinely difficult to answer. Could it? Could Springfield exist without the nuclear plant? Could a town of this size, with this population, with this level of economic development and civic infrastructure, support itself without the plant's employment and taxes and the spending those wages generate? The show does not answer this question. It does not need to. The question itself is the answer. A town that cannot survive without its dominant employer cannot meaningfully threaten that employer. A workforce that has no alternative cannot collectively bargain in any real sense. A community whose schools and hospitals and roads are funded by a single company's taxes cannot credibly investigate that company. Burns has made himself indispensable, and indispensability in the company town is power of the most complete and durable kind. But there is a crack in this. There has always been a crack. Lisa Simpson. Lisa, at 8 years old, is already the economic system's most dangerous element. Not because she is a revolutionary or an activist, though the show has given her moments of both, but because she can see the structure, she can trace the dependency. She can understand at a level of clarity that most adults in Springfield cannot access, what the plant is doing to the town and why the town cannot organize against it. Lisa is the child who will grow up and leave Springfield and look back at it from the outside and understand, with full adult clarity, the exact shape of what was done to her family and her town. The show has depicted this future. In the flash-forward episodes, the adult Lisa is a senator, a president, a person of consequence in the world beyond Springfield. A person who made it out. A person who took the clarity she was born with, the clarity that was a source of isolation in Springfield, and turned it into the thing that gave her access to a larger world. But she leaves. The adult Lisa leaves Springfield, and the town remains. With the plant, with the dependency, with the closed loop of wages and spending and taxes and services and wages cycling endlessly, sustaining the community at a level just sufficient to prevent the kind of desperation that might generate genuine revolt, and not quite sufficient to generate the comfort that might allow people to look up from their immediate circumstances and ask the larger questions. Burns has calibrated this with terrible precision. He keeps Springfield just comfortable enough to keep. He keeps Springfield just uncomfortable enough to keep quiet. And the yellow families of Evergreen Terrace and all the other streets in Springfield wake up every morning and go to work and come home and watch television and go to sleep and wake up again. And the plant hums in the distance, and the cracked cooling towers leak their invisible contribution into the water and the air. And the town continues, and the economy continues, and Burns continues. Everything continues. That is the economy of Springfield. It is not a comedy. It is a system. Section 7. Every death, every resurrection, every forgotten catastrophe. There are things that have happened in Springfield that should have permanently changed it. Not in the way that real-world events change real places. Not through the slow accretion of consequence and adaptation that constitutes actual history. But within the logic of the show's own universe, within the internal reality that the show has been constructing and maintaining across 36 years, there are events so enormous, so structurally significant, so fundamentally world-altering that their disappearance from the town's collective memory is stranger than anything that happened in them. Let us make a partial list. The town was once sealed under a glass dome by the federal government. A monorail was built in Springfield on the basis of a town hall meeting, corrupted by a charismatic con man, was operated by Homer Simpson with no training, nearly killed the entire population, and was eventually stopped by a donut. The monorail infrastructure, which presumably still exists somewhere in Springfield's geography, is never referenced again. Springfield was once flooded. Not metaphorically. Actually flooded. The town was significantly underwater. The Simpsons have, at various points, lost their house, lost their car, lost their money entirely, faced foreclosure, and been reduced to circumstances that in a realistic narrative would require years to recover from. By the next episode, everything is back to normal. There have been nuclear incidents at the plant. Not full meltdowns, but events significant enough to qualify as serious industrial accidents. These events are addressed within the episodes they occur in and then never mentioned again. A comet nearly destroyed Springfield. Depending on how you read the episode, it may or may not have landed on the town. The question of what happened after the comet's approach is not addressed. Sideshow Bob, a convicted felon who has attempted to murder Bart Simpson on multiple occasions, keeps being released from prison. Each attempt on Bart's life results in Bob's recapture and conviction, and then his release, and then another attempt. The justice system of Springfield is not depicted as broken in a general sense. It is specifically and repeatedly broken in the exact way that allows this specific cycle to continue. The entire premise of Springfield's criminal justice situation deserves more attention than it usually gets because it is doing something more interesting than simple comedy. The revolving door of Sideshow Bob, brilliant, theatrical, murderous, constantly defeated by a 10-year-old, is one of the show's most sustained comedic structures. But it is also a comment on a justice system that processes people through without changing them, that releases without rehabilitation, that cycles the same crimes through the same courts and the same prisons, and produces the same outcomes with extraordinary consistency. Bob is educated. Bob is talented. Bob has demonstrated in various episodes the capacity for genuine change and genuine connection. He marries. He has a child. He lives, for a period, a life that looks like redemption. And then the cycle pulls him back because the show needs the cycle, and because the cycle is also the truth about recidivism and the specific failure of systems that punish without healing. But let us return to the larger question, the forgotten catastrophes. The pattern is this. Something enormous happens. Springfield is changed. The change is addressed within the episode, worked through, resolved, or partially resolved. And then the next episode arrives, and Springfield is exactly as it was before the enormous thing happened. This is, as we mentioned, a standard feature of episodic television, particularly animated episodic television. The reset is built into the format. The show returns to its baseline state because maintaining continuity across hundreds of episodes is logistically complex and narratively limiting. But The Simpsons has been running long enough that the resets have become something more than a production convenience. They have become a portrait of a specific kind of collective amnesia that is, when you look at it closely, one of the more accurate things the show has ever done about American civic life. Communities forget. This is not a failure of individual memory. It is a feature of how communities process trauma and crisis. The flood happens. The town responds. The water recedes. Life continues. And within a generation, the flood is a story rather than an experience, a piece of local color rather than a structural warning about drainage and development and infrastructure and the relationship between the decisions made by wealthy landowners upstream and the consequences borne by ordinary residents downstream. Springfield forgets the dome because remembering the dome would require confronting the contamination that necessitated it. Springfield forgets the monorail because remembering the monorail would require confronting the civic gullibility that allowed a con man to steal their municipal funds. Springfield forgets the floods and the comets and the nuclear incidents because each of these events, properly remembered and analyzed, would lead to the same set of questions, the same confrontation with the same underlying problem. The plant, always the plant. Every catastrophe in Springfield's history traces back one way or another to the nuclear power plant and the man who owns it and the decisions he has made for over a century in service of his own interests at the expense of everyone else's. The dome is the contamination. The contamination is the plant. The monorail is the civic dysfunction. The civic dysfunction is the captured government. The captured government is Burns. The floods are the environmental damage. The environmental damage is the plant. The nuclear incidents are the plant, directly, without even the intermediate step. Everything is the plant. And Springfield forgets everything because Springfield cannot afford to remember anything. Because memory leads to connection, and connection leads to the plant, and the plant leads to Burns, and Burns leads to the end of the economy, and the end of the economy leads to the dissolution of Springfield. So they forget. Every episode, like clockwork. Now let us talk about the specific deaths, because the show has killed its characters and its residents more times than any casual viewer tracks, and the deaths are doing something more complicated than they appear. There are characters in Springfield who die and do not come back. Mrs. Hoover, the teacher. Maud Flanders, the wife. Frank Grimes, the hapless everyman who appeared for one episode and whose fate we will discuss at length. Bleeding Gums Murphy, Lisa's jazz idol and the most unambiguously real loss in the show's history. These deaths stick. The show does not undo them. The characters who were shaped by these deaths, Lisa in the case of Bleeding Gums, Ned in the case of Maud, Bart in the case of Grimes, carry the loss forward in ways that persist beyond the episode. Then there are the characters who die and come back. Hans Moleman, who we discussed in other contexts. Homer himself, in the various dream sequences and near-death experiences and afterlife episodes that the show has produced across its run. Guest characters. Background characters. The unnamed extras who populate Springfield and who are regularly depicted dying and then appearing in the next scene as if the previous scene did not happen. The distinction matters. The show has a category of death that is permanent and a category of death that is cosmetic. And the way it sorts characters into these categories tells you something about what the show values and what it treats as expendable. The deaths that stick are the ones with emotional weight, the ones connected to the main character's actual emotional lives. Bleeding Gums dies because his death is the thing that breaks open Lisa's grief in a new direction. that teaches her something about loss that she cannot learn any other way. Maud dies in circumstances that are considerably less dignified than her character deserved, as the result of the t-shirt cannon incident, because her death is what breaks Ned open, what cracks the conditioning, and allows the buried person to surface. The deaths that do not stick are the deaths that the show needs to use for other purposes. Humor, escalation, background texture. These deaths are disposable because the characters who experience them are in the show's economy, disposable. Not because they do not matter as people. The show has occasionally made the point, quietly and poignantly, that every background character in Springfield is a full person with a full life happening off-screen. But because the narrative does not have the bandwidth to process them as significant. There is something uncomfortable in this, in the category of lives that matter and the category of lives that are too small for consequence. In the way that Hans Moleman can die in the background of a scene and the foreground characters do not notice, because the foreground is where the story is happening and the background is where the extras live. This is not unique to The Simpsons. It is how narrative always works. Stories are necessarily selective. They cannot give equal weight to everything. They must have a center and a periphery. But The Simpsons has been running long enough, and its periphery has become dense enough with recurring characters and established histories and small plots that have their own internal logic, that the periphery is no longer simply backdrop. The background of Springfield is thick with lives, and the show's willingness to kill those lives for a joke and then reset them for the next scene is a choice about what counts, and those choices add up. Frank Grimes. Frank Grimes deserves his own extended consideration because he is the show's most direct meditation on what happens when you import the logic of the real world into Springfield. Frank Grimes, called grimy by the people who liked him, is introduced in a Season 8 episode as a man who has earned everything he has the hard way. He grew up in poverty, he worked through school, he survived an explosion that left him deaf and blind for years. He recovered. He educated himself. He built a career through sustained effort and genuine merit. He is, by any measure of what we tell ourselves America rewards, someone who should be doing very well. He ends up at the nuclear plant in the same department as Homer. And he watches Homer, and he cannot comprehend what he is seeing. Homer has everything: house, family, boat, the occasional celebrity friendship, the ability to screw up repeatedly and catastrophically without consequence. Homer does not deserve any of it by Grimes's logic, not by the logic of effort and merit and the careful accumulation of earned reward. Homer exists in blatant violation of the narrative that Grimes has organized his entire life around. Grimes becomes increasingly unhinged as the episode progresses, not because he is unstable in a medical sense, but because his understanding of reality is being tested against evidence that contradicts it completely. He is watching what happens when someone who has played by the rules looks at someone who has not and realizes that the rules did not actually determine the outcome. And the episode ends with Grimes dead. He dies as a result of his own breakdown, of the cognitive failure that results when the worldview you have organized your life around is definitively disproved. He dies reaching for something that should have been dangerous, because the rules should have made it dangerous, because in any logically organized world, the consequences should have been real. But he is not in a logically organized world. He is in Springfield. And in Springfield, the rules that should protect you do not apply. At Grimes's funeral, Homer falls asleep and snores. The other mourners laugh. This is the episode's final statement. It is not a warm statement. It is not a hopeful statement. It is the show looking directly at the camera and saying, the man who did everything right died. The man who does everything wrong is snoring at his funeral. And the people of Springfield find this funny. Because they live here, because they have already made their peace with the illegibility of this place. Because they stopped expecting logic and consequence a long time ago. Frank Grimes could not make that peace. And his inability to make that peace, his insistence on holding Springfield to the standards he had organized his life around, is what killed him. Springfield does not kill people who challenge it. It simply demonstrates, with patient and unvarying cruelty, that the challenge cannot be sustained. That eventually reality will grind you down to the shape the town requires. That you will either adapt, forget the dome, forget the monorail, Forget the three-eyed fish. Or you will be ground to powder. Grimes was ground to powder. The real Seymour Skinner was tied to a train and expelled. Mona Simpson was driven underground and spent 27 years as a fugitive. These are the fates of people who insisted on a reality that Springfield had decided not to maintain. And Homer snores at their funerals. The catastrophes are forgotten because Springfield's survival depends on forgetting them. The deaths are categorized because the narrative requires hierarchy. The resets happen because the show must go on. But the accumulation of all of this, the layers of forgotten disaster and staged death and institutional collapse and chronic reset, is doing something to the viewer over 36 years of exposure. It is teaching you the logic of Springfield, the logic that says nothing is permanent, consequences do not stick. The town will return to its baseline, and the next catastrophe will be forgotten too. Just like the last one, because that is what this place is for. Not for growth, not for consequence, not for the slow, difficult, non-linear progress that real communities make when they are honest about their failures. Springfield is for returning to normal. And normal in Springfield is the nuclear plant humming on the hill, and the yellow families eating dinner and watching television, and the cracked cooling towers leaking their invisible contribution into the air, and Burns in his mansion, calculating the next episode's worth of strategy, and Homer on the couch, asleep, dreaming or not dreaming, alive or not entirely alive, and the family around him, holding, always holding. Section 8. The side characters who hold the town together. Springfield is full of people. This is easy to forget because the show is so thoroughly centered on the Simpson family that the surrounding population can come to feel like furniture. But the surrounding population of Springfield is one of the densest and most carefully developed supporting casts in the history of American television. Over 36 years, hundreds of named characters have been introduced, sustained, returned to, developed, occasionally killed, and persistently inhabited by voice performances of extraordinary commitment. And many of these characters, the ones who recur across decades, the ones whose personal stories the show has slowly built in the spaces between the main plots, are doing something more than comic relief. They are carrying the show's argument about community, about what happens to ordinary people in a town that has been systematically damaged, about the texture of lives lived under conditions that most people do not examine closely enough to name. Let us spend time with some of them. Ned Flanders. We have mentioned Ned already in the context of his psychological conditioning and the show's thesis about goodness in a system that does not reward goodness. But Ned deserves extended, careful attention because he is the show's most sustained and most honest portrait of what faith looks like from the inside in a world that does not provide obvious evidence for its presence. Ned believes, not in the performative, socially instrumental way that some of Springfield's churchgoers believe, using religion as a social technology, as a way of signaling virtue and belonging and respectability. Ned believes genuinely, specifically, with a depth of conviction that the show takes seriously even when it uses that conviction as a source of comedy. Ned's faith is not naive. This is important. The show has tested Ned's faith with a sustained ferocity that would have broken a less committed person. He has lost his wife in a freak accident caused, ultimately, by his neighbor's selfishness. He has lost his house to a hurricane and had it rebuilt by the community so poorly that it collapsed immediately after completion. He has prayed visibly and earnestly in circumstances that suggest the prayers are not being heard. He has watched Homer, his neighbor, his tormentor, the man whose selfishness cost him his wife, receive the kind of casual divine attention that Ned, who has dedicated his life to the attempt, cannot access. God speaks to Homer. This is established. Homer has met God multiple times. God has intervened in Homer's life with a directness that makes the theological situation of the show very strange if you think about it carefully. An all-knowing, all-powerful God exists in the Simpsons universe and has chosen, for whatever divine reason, to engage most directly with the show's least devout and most oblivious character. And Ned, who goes to church every Sunday and prays daily and lives as close to the prescriptions of his faith as any human being could reasonably manage, receives no comparable attention. The show does not explain this. It does not resolve it. It does not use it to make a statement about the arbitrary nature of divine favor or the futility of religious practice. It just holds it there as a fact about the world of the show, as a condition under which Ned lives. And Ned's response to this condition is not to lose his faith. He keeps going. He keeps praying. He keeps showing up to the church that he has attended every Sunday of his life, to the God who has not spoken to him, with the specific doggedness of a person whose commitment exists independently of its outcomes. This is either the most admirable thing in the show or the saddest, depending on how you look at it. It is probably both. After Maud's death, the show went somewhere with Ned that very few animated comedies would have dared. It showed the grief. Not abstractly, not in a single episode resolved by the end credits, but over multiple seasons, in the specific texture of a man learning to live in a house that still has her shape in it. The grief was depicted as what grief actually is, Maz. Not a period with a clear ending, but a reorganization of a life around an absence that does not diminish, but that you learn, slowly, to navigate. Ned eventually remarries. He finds happiness of a different shape. The show honors this without suggesting that the new happiness erases the old grief, without suggesting that Ned's love for Maud was superseded or replaced. It was accumulated. He carries Maud into the new life. He carries everything. This is what the show does best with its secondary characters. It gives them time. It gives them the time that a half-hour animated comedy is not supposed to give secondary characters. And in that time, in the accumulation of small moments across decades of episodes, it builds people. People with histories and wounds and capacities and specific ways of being in the world that you come to know with the kind of familiarity that is only available from long acquaintance. Ned Flanders is the most fully realized character in Springfield, who is not a Simpson. He is the show's argument that goodness is real, that it is worth something even when it is not rewarded, that a person who tries to be good and keeps trying despite the evidence against it is doing something that deserves to be seen with respect rather than comedy. The comedy is real too. Ned is funny, but he is also real. Both things simultaneously, without either one diminishing the other. Mo Sheslak. Mo is funny in the way that total misery, when sustained long enough, becomes funny. He is funny in the way that a man who expects nothing good to happen to him and is consistently confirmed in this expectation is funny. He is funny because his despair is so thorough and so consistent and so specifically expressed that it has a quality of artistry to it. But Mo is also the show's most direct portrait of loneliness in the male register. Not the loneliness of isolation. The bar is full, at least during Homer's visits, but the loneliness of a man who cannot find his way to connection with other people, who wants desperately and silently the things that the world seems to distribute freely to everyone except him, who watches Homer and Marge and the family at 742 Evergreen Terrace from the specific vantage point of someone who cannot imagine having what they have, who cannot quite reach the life that is visible from where he stands. The phone gag, Bart calling Mose and asking for someone named Alcoholic, or Amanda Hug and Kiss, or some other comically inappropriate name, is one of the show's oldest running jokes. And it is a joke about a man who keeps answering the phone, hoping it might be someone calling for him. The prank calls are not just pranks. They are the specific cruelty of a child who has identified the exact shape of an adult's longing and is exploiting it for entertainment. Mo wants to be called. He wants someone to ask for him. He wants the phone to ring and the call to be real. And it never is. And he keeps answering. This is heartbreaking when you let yourself see it directly. The show does not usually ask you to see it directly. It uses the laugh as a buffer. But occasionally, in the episodes where Mo's character is the subject rather than the vehicle, the show pulls the buffer away and shows you what is actually happening. Mo is a man who loves badly and is bad at being loved, who has an ugly face that the show has made a running joke of his own awareness of, who has a past that the show has given fragments of, a career as a child actor, a period as a bare-knuckle boxer, various other lives and selves before the bar, that suggest a person of more complexity and more history than the single dimension of the bartender he inhabits most of the time. Mo deserved more. The character deserved more, from the show and from the world it depicts. The show occasionally seems aware of this and does something with it. Those are the episodes where Mo is worth watching most carefully. Lenny and Carl. Lenny Leonard and Carl Carlson occupy a specific position in the show's economy that is worth examining. They are Homer's best friends. They work alongside him at the plant. They drink beside him at Moe's. They appear in the background of his life with the consistency of people who have been in the same room for so long that they have become part of the furniture. But Lenny and Carl are not interchangeable, and the show, at its best, knows this. Carl is black. This makes him, by straightforward demographic count, one of the few regular black characters in a cast that has historically reflected the racial composition of American television more than the racial composition of actual American cities. The show has addressed Carl's blackness in varying ways across its run, sometimes directly, sometimes through the specific erasure that comedy facilitates, sometimes with the kind of careful attention that suggests the writers understood what they were doing. Carl is consistently the most competent person in Homer's immediate social circle. He is educated, by the show's own admission. He has a master's degree, which is more than anyone else at the plant can claim, certainly more than Homer. He is emotionally intelligent. He can read situations that Homer cannot read. He can navigate the dynamics of Moe's and the plant and Springfield's social ecosystem with a facility that makes his friendship with Homer the more interesting mystery. What is Carl doing here with these people in this life? The show has given fragments of an answer across various episodes. Carl has a home, Iceland, a culture, a family history that is periodically revealed with more depth than the comedy format usually accommodates. He has a secret, hinted at across multiple episodes, about his background and identity that the show has teased and circled without ever fully resolving. What is clear is that Carl chose this life. He chose Homer and Lenny and Moe's and the plant. For reasons the show has not fully articulated, but that the character's consistency suggests are real. He is here because he wants to be here. And there is something in that choice. The educated, capable, competent man who has chosen to spend his life in the company of imperfect, limited, struggling people rather than reaching for the life his credentials would theoretically permit. That says something about what Carl values and what he has decided matters. Lenny, meanwhile, is the show's most under-examined character in proportion to his screen time. He is there, he is always there, he is funny, in his specific way. He suffers eye injuries with implausible regularity in a way that has become its own running gag. He says things that are almost right, but not quite. He is beside Homer at every significant moment, bearing witness to a life he is not quite living, but is positioned closer to than anyone outside the family. What is Lenny? What is he actually underneath the comic function? The show has rarely asked this question directly, and when it does, what emerges is a man who is simply, quietly, completely devoted to his friends. Not in a showy way, not in a way that asks for recognition. Lenny is present. He is reliable. He is the specific warmth of a friend who does not require much and gives without keeping account. Springfield needs Lenny, not the plot, the town, the actual emotional ecosystem of the show. Lenny is the baseline human warmth that makes it possible to believe that not everyone in Springfield is damaged in ways that express themselves as crisis. Lenny is just there and just okay and just warm. That is its own kind of rare. Principal Skinner, or Armin Tamzarian, or whoever he is. We have discussed the identity revelation at length in other contexts, but the character himself, the man who has been calling himself Seymour Skinner for longer than he can remember, who has built a life and a self on a stolen foundation, is doing something specific and important. Skinner is the portrait of institutional authority in a context where institutional authority has no real foundation. He runs the school, but the school has no money. He sets the rules, but the rules are unenforced except when it costs him nothing to enforce them. He maintains the structure of educational authority, the principal's office, the detention system, the report cards and parent conferences, in a building that is actively falling apart around him. And underneath all of this, he is a fraud. He is a man named Armin Tamzorian, performing a role that was never written for him, carrying a name that was never his. The revelation of his false identity, the episode that the show's fans have never forgiven and never forgotten, is so uncomfortable specifically because it is so honest about what institutional authority usually is. Not the confident, well-founded exercise of legitimate power, but the performance of legitimate power by someone who stumbled into the role and has been improvising ever since. Skinner is afraid. He has always been afraid. He is afraid that the real Seymour Skinner will come back, that the imposter will be discovered, that the life he has built will be revealed as the fiction it is. And this fear expresses itself as the specific rigidity and overreach of institutional authority in the hands of someone who does not quite believe in their own legitimacy. The show has given Skinner a tenderness, too. His relationship with his mother, Agnes, who is a figure of comedy but also of genuine sadness, a woman of iron opinions and suppressed vulnerability who loves her son with a completeness that expresses itself almost entirely as criticism. The Skinner-Agnes dynamic is the show's funniest version of a real thing. The relationship between a child and a parent whose love is so large and so unprocessed that it comes out as control. Agnes loves Skinner. She has always loved him. Even knowing he is not her son, she chose him. He is hers. And her love, expressed as criticism and control and the relentless management of a grown man's life and emotions, is the specific love of a woman who has made someone into her reason and cannot afford to let them be free. Skinner cannot leave. Agnes will not let him go. And Skinner does not fight this with the force of a man who genuinely wants freedom. Because Skinner, for all his frustrations and his ambitions and his fantasy of escape to a life of his own, is also afraid of what he would be without her. He built himself on the foundation of being her son. Who is Armin Tamzarian without Agnes Skinner? Nobody knows, including him, Sideshow Bob. Kelsey Grammer's performance as Sideshow Bob is one of the great sustained comic dramatic achievements in American television, and the character himself is one of the show's most interesting meditations on the relationship between intelligence and consequence. Bob is, by any measure, one of the most accomplished people in Springfield. He is cultured, educated, articulate, capable of planning and executing schemes of considerable complexity. He speaks multiple languages, he has genuine aesthetic sensibilities. He is, in the classical sense, a man of parts. And he cannot stop trying to murder a 10-year-old. The comedy of this, the enormous gap between Bob's self-conception as a person of refinement and his actual preoccupation with killing Bart Simpson, is the show's most sustained joke about the relationship between intelligence and pettiness. Bob is not undermined by his murderous obsession in the way that a small person would be. He is made more comic by it, not less. The grandiosity and the petty grudge coexist in him with a completeness that suggests they are not in conflict but are, in fact, expressions of the same thing. Bob was humiliated by Bart, initially, in the episode that first exposed him as the person behind the crimes he had been framing Krusty for. Bart, a child, saw through him. Bart, with the specific perceptive mischief of a 10-year-old who cannot be fooled by performances, saw behind the performance to the crime. And Bob has never forgiven him. Not because Bart did something uniquely terrible, but because Bart was right. Because the humiliation of being seen through, of having your performance of legitimacy exposed by someone who was not supposed to be smart enough to see through it, is the specific humiliation that a person of Bob's self-regard cannot absorb without reorganizing their entire sense of self. Bob cannot let it go, cannot integrate the defeat and move forward, cannot be the version of himself who was outsmarted by a child and has accepted this as part of his history. He keeps coming back, he keeps trying, and he keeps failing, and the failures accumulate, and each failure is another defeat by the same child. and the wound is never allowed to heal because the wound keeps being reopened. Bob is the show's most complete portrait of what happens when pride is larger than reason. He is brilliant, and he is trapped by his own brilliance, unable to do the one thing that would free him, which is to stop caring about the outcome and move on. He never moves on. Springfield does not allow it. Springfield does not allow moving on. Springfield requires the cycle. The prison, the release, the attempt, the defeat, the prison. The same loop, turning. The same wound, reopening. Every character in Springfield is in some version of this loop. The specific shape of the loop varies, but the loop itself is constant. And the secondary characters are where the loops are most visible because they have less to distract from it. The main characters have plots to carry, arcs to navigate, the comedy machine to serve. The secondary characters simply turn in their loops, episode after episode, and if you are watching carefully, you can see exactly what each loop is made of. In Ned's loop, faith tested, faith maintained. In Moe's loop, hope offered, hope disappointed. In Bob's loop, revenge attempted, revenge foiled. In Skinner's loop, authority performed, authority undermined. All of them trapped, all of them trying, all of them coming back. Because Springfield does not let you go. Section 9. The marriage at the center of everything. A marriage is a specific kind of promise. Not the formal promise, the legal contract, the words said in front of witnesses. Those are the public version. The real promise is the private one, made continuously, in every small act of continued presence. In the daily choice to come back, to try again. To extend grace where it is not strictly required. To say yes to the complexity of another person, again, every day, for as long as you both shall live. Homer and Marge have been making this private promise for 36 years. They have made it in bedrooms and kitchens and cars and hospital waiting rooms, and the specific domestic chaos of a house with 3 children and a dog and a cat and a yard that always needs attention. They have made it in the middle of arguments and at the end of apologies and in the silences that fall between people who know each other well enough to not always need to speak. They have made it in the episodes where Homer does something terrible, which is roughly every other episode, and Marge does something that the show treats as forgiveness, but that is actually something more complicated and more courageous than forgiveness. It is the choice to continue, not to forget or excuse or explain away, to continue. To look at this imperfect, damaged, loving, infuriating person and choose again the life you have built with him. This choice has been called enabling by critics of the show's relationship dynamics. It has been called unrealistic by people who compare it to what a modern, self-respecting woman would do. It has been called too forgiving, too patient, too accommodating of behavior that the show itself occasionally acknowledges as beyond the pale. These critiques are not without substance. The Homer-Marge marriage has, at various points, depicted forgiveness of things that most relationships would not survive. Homer's neglect, his impulsiveness, his occasional complete disregard for Marge's clearly stated needs, his emotional unavailability in the moments when she most needed him available. But the critics miss something. They are measuring the Simpsons marriage against a standard of contemporary relationship health that the show has never claimed to meet. The Homer-Marge marriage is not a model of healthy modern partnership. It is a portrait of a specific kind of love. The kind that exists between people who are deeply, sometimes painfully, imperfectly suited to each other, and who have decided that the imperfect suitedness is not a reason to leave. The marriage works because of the specific chemistry between these two people. Not the physical chemistry, though the show has acknowledged that this is real and sustained. The relational chemistry, the specific way that Homer's impulsiveness meets Marge's steadiness, the way her seriousness balances his levity, the way his warmth compensates for her occasional rigidity, the way they are each what the other is not. This is not an accident. This is the specific design of how people choose each other, the way the unconscious arranges the selection of partners around the completion of something missing. Homer and Marge are not similar people who got lucky. They are complementary people who recognized each other and have been completing each other ever since. The show has been most honest about this in the episodes where the marriage is genuinely at risk. Not the comedy crises, the misunderstandings and the Homer does something stupid episodes, but the real ones. The ones where the fundamental question of whether these two people should be together is actually seriously in play. There is an episode where Marge briefly considers leaving Homer for another man, a sophisticated, attentive, genuinely appealing alternative who can offer her things Homer cannot. The episode plays seriously with this possibility. It does not immediately reassure you that Marge will make the right choice. It lets the alternative sit there, visible and tempting and real. And Marge chooses Homer. Not because the alternative is revealed as false or insufficient. The alternative is real. It is genuinely appealing. It would offer Marge real things that her life with Homer does not provide. She chooses Homer anyway. She chooses the imperfect known over the appealing unknown. She chooses the man who cannot always give her what she needs, but who loves her with a completeness that she knows from the inside is not available anywhere else. This is not a naive choice. This is not the choice of a woman who does not know better or cannot see the appeal of the alternative. It is the choice of a woman who has looked at her options with clear eyes and decided that the life she has built with this particular imperfect person is the life she wants to continue building. The show presents this as romantic. It is romantic. But it is also something else. It is a statement about what fidelity actually means, when it is not maintained by default or by inertia, but by continuous, informed, deliberate choice. Homer's love for Marge has its own quality that deserves extended examination. Homer loves Marge with the specific, undivided, slightly unreasonable intensity of a man who found the thing he was looking for and has never gotten over the luck of having found it. He loves her the way people love the things that save them. Because Marge did save him, in the specific sense that she gave him the family that his damaged, motherless, Springfieldian self could not have found any other way. She gave him something real to belong to. A house, children, a life with enough weight and warmth in it to counterbalance the damage. Homer's gratitude for this is not separate from his love. It is part of it. He loves Marge because she is Marge, because of who she is, because of the specific combination of strength and warmth and patience and beauty that constitutes her. But he also loves her because she married him, because she looked at him, this specific, broken, lovable, catastrophically imperfect man, and decided he was worth it. And for a person who grew up without a mother, who grew up being told by implication and event, if not by explicit statement, that he was not worth the staying, this choice was enormous. Marge stayed. She keeps staying. And Homer, who has every reason to not quite believe in the permanence of love, who was shaped in childhood to expect abandonment, keeps being surprised and grateful and a little overwhelmed by the fact of her continued presence. This dynamic, Homer's gratitude and his slightly odd love, Marge's steadiness and her continuous choice, is what the marriage is made of underneath everything else. And it is, when you strip away the comedy and the plots and the reset buttons, genuinely, durably beautiful. Not perfect, not the marriage you should have or the marriage that would win awards for healthiness, but real, human, sustained across 36 years with the specific effort of two people who have decided that the promise they made is worth the cost of keeping it. Let us talk about the specific moments the show has given them. There is an episode where Homer discovers that Marge's hair is not naturally blue. This is presented as a revelation, as the uncovering of a secret that Homer had not known in years of marriage. And Homer's response is characteristic. He does not feel deceived. He does not make it about himself. He sees Marge, her gray hair, her natural self, the version of herself she had been hiding, and he loves her. He loves her more, specifically, because the natural version of herself is something she kept private, and he gets to see it. The episode is about vulnerability and the specific trust that marriage asks for. Marge has been maintaining a performance even in her most intimate relationship. The blue hair is not just comedy. It is a detail about a woman who learned, somewhere and somehow, that certain true things about herself needed to be managed rather than shown. And Homer's response, uncalculating, immediate, warm, is the exact response that makes the management feel unnecessary. That says, you can show me. I will not use what you show me against you. There is an episode where Homer and Marge go back to the drive-in theater where they had their first date. The episode is sweet, but the sweetness has an edge to it. They are trying to recapture something. They are aware that the years have changed them, have changed the marriage, have added weight and complication, and the specific distance that accumulates between people who are so thoroughly enmeshed in the dailiness of a shared life that they can lose track of the thing that started it. The drive-in is the show's version of the couple's retreat, the deliberate investment in the romance that sustains the commitment. And it works in the episode. They find each other again. The sweetness prevails. But the reaching for it, the awareness that the connection can be lost in the dailiness, that it requires maintenance, that it is not automatic, is the true content of the episode. Marriages are not self-sustaining. They require the active investment of the people in them. Homer and Marge have to keep choosing each other. The show knows this. The drive-in episode is the show reminding you that the choice is ongoing. And then there is the late-night quality of the marriage. The thing that happens between Homer and Marge after the children are in bed, and the house is quiet, and they are just two people in a room together, without the roles they play in front of the children, or the town, or the comedy machine. The show glimpses this sometimes, in brief moments between scenes, in the quality of their stillness when they are in the same room without anything requiring their attention. There is something in those moments, a settled, comfortable, specific intimacy that is the product of 3 decades of shared life and is not available any other way. They know each other, not perfectly, not with the complete transparency that some love stories promise, but deeply, with the kind of knowledge that comes from having seen each other in every condition, in the highest moments and the lowest, in crisis and in ordinary afternoon, in the versions of each other that are best and the versions that are worst. And they have chosen each other in all of those versions. This is the marriage, not the comedy, not the crises, the choosing, every episode, every season, every time the show considers seriously whether the marriage is worth it and arrives at the same answer. Yes. With everything it costs, with all its imperfections, with all the things it cannot provide and all the things it provides that nothing else can. Yes, the marriage at the center of The Simpsons is the show's central argument. More than the satire, more than the social commentary, more than the predictions and the mysteries and the theories. The marriage says, love between imperfect people is real. It is not clean, and it is not easy, and it is not the love you were shown in movies and songs. But it is real, and it is worth it, and the proof of its worth is 36 years of choosing it. Episode after episode, season after season, the same 2 yellow people in the same house choosing each other again and again and again. Homer and Marge. The marriage at the center of everything. Holding. Section 10. What the Treehouse of Horror episodes actually mean. Every October, for 36 years, The Simpsons has done something that no other show in television history has done with the same commitment, the same consistency, or the same depth of accumulated meaning. It has died. Not the characters, exactly, not in the canonical sense. The Treehouse of Horror episodes, the annual Halloween specials that now number well over 30, are explicitly non-canonical. The show tells you this at the beginning. What happens in the treehouse does not count. The deaths and transformations and cosmic horrors and supernatural intrusions will not affect what happens in the regular episodes. Everything here is disposable. Everything here is for the horror. And then it proceeds to kill the Simpson family in every way it can imagine. Over and over, every year. More ways to die, more apocalypses, more transformations into monsters, and aliens and demons, and the victims of forces beyond their control. The Simpsons has been ritualized, destroyed every October since 1990, and it will be ritually destroyed again next October, and the October after that, and the entire exercise has always been treated as exactly what it says it is. A lark, a departure, a comedic exploration of genre conventions that allows the show to do things it cannot do within its regular structure. But the Treehouse of Horror episodes are doing something more than that. They are the show's pressure valve. Let us think about what the regular Simpsons holds in. 36 years of accumulated damage that does not stick. Homer's injuries, forgotten. Catastrophes, reset. Deaths, reversed. Characters, unchanged. The show maintains its characters in a state of permanent preservation, protected from consequence by the structure of episodic television and the specific needs of a show that must be able to welcome casual viewers without requiring that they have watched 35 years of backstory. Nothing sticks. Nothing can stick. The format prevents it, except in October. In the Treehouse of Horror episodes, consequences are real. Characters die and stay dead, at least within the episode. Transformations happen and are not undone by the end credits. The town is destroyed in ways that are not forgotten by the time of the next scene. The horror is allowed to be horror because the non-canonical frame removes the need to clean it up afterward. And what the show chooses to do with this freedom is enormously revealing, because the Treehouse of Horror episodes are not, when you look at them carefully, random excursions into genre. They are not simply parodies of horror movies and science fiction classics, though they are that too. They are the show's most honest expression of its own anxieties. The fears it cannot voice in the regular episodes because the regular episodes are a comedy, and comedy does not have room for this quality of dread. Let us look at what the Treehouse episodes keep returning to. They return again and again to Homer dying. Not just being hurt, which the regular show does constantly, but specifically completely dying. And the deaths are often connected to his family. He dies protecting them. He dies because of a mistake he made for them. He dies and watches them from some kind of afterlife, and the watching is described with a longing and a tenderness that the regular show's comedy does not often accommodate. The Treehouse of Horror is where Homer gets to die loving his family, and he does it every year. Think about what this means. The show, which cannot allow Homer to die in its regular run, which must preserve him for the next episode and the next season and the next decade, uses its non-canonical horror special to give him the thing the regular format cannot give him. Finality, the complete expression of his love. The death that is not a reset but an ending. That means something because it costs something. Homer dies in the Treehouse of Horror so that Homer can mean something in his death that he cannot mean in his immortal, reborn, forgotten by next week regular episodes. The special is the place where the show tells the truth it cannot tell the rest of the year. The transformations are as revealing as the deaths. Homer becomes a monster in the Treehouse episodes more frequently than any other character. Not a villain, not a corrupt version of himself, but a monster, something inhuman, something altered at the physical level, something that is still Homer in its essential qualities, but that has been changed by the horror into a form that the world around him cannot accommodate. This is not a difficult symbol to read. Homer is always, in some sense, a monster. The regular show depicts him as a person whose cognitive and physical difference from the people around him is visible and sustained and mostly played for comedy. Homer's yellow skin, his 4 fingers, his skull that holds a crayon, his body that survives everything. Homer is always already a little monstrous, in the specific sense of being different enough from normal, that the category of normal does not quite apply. The Treehouse of Horror episodes make this explicit. They let Homer be fully, formally monstrous. They let the metaphor become literal. They let the thing the regular show keeps as subtext surface into text, howl and be defeated, and stay defeated within the non-canonical space where the defeat can be permanent. And then the regular show resumes, and Homer is Homer again, and the monster is back in the subtext where it lives. The family dynamics in the Treehouse episodes are particularly rich because the horror format allows the show to express things about the family's relationships that the comedy format cannot support. There are Treehouse segments where Bart genuinely threatens his family, not in the mischievous, will be fine by the end of the episode way of the regular show. Genuinely, with real menace, with the kind of anger and destructive capacity that the show very carefully keeps contained in its regular episodes. The Bart of the Treehouse is the version of Bart whose rage has found its expression, whose performance of not caring has been stripped away to reveal the force underneath. And he is frightening, and Homer faces him. And the dynamic between them, the father and the son, whose relationship is one of the show's most carefully managed balancing acts, is allowed to become explicitly dangerous rather than just implicitly strained. The horror shows you what the comedy manages. The Treehouse episodes have also been, across their run, the show's most politically sharp moments. The satire in the regular episodes can be blunted by the comedy, softened by the need to not alienate too much of the audience, contained within the specific generic parameters of family situation comedy. The horror format gives the show license to be sharper, to take the political and social critique that is always there, running underneath, and bring it to the surface with the force that the regular format does not permit. The Treehouse episode set in a dystopian future America, the one that parodies the surveillance state or the corporate state or the political dysfunction or whichever specific expression of American structural failure the writers were most alarmed about in a given year. These episodes are often among the most politically incisive things the show has done. Not because the horror format makes them more credible, but because the horror format gives them permission to take the thing to its conclusion. The regular show can show you the beginning of the disaster. The Treehouse can show you the end. And the specific horror of the Treehouse year after year is always the same horror at its core. It is the horror of the family being destroyed. Not the town, not Springfield in the abstract, the family. Specifically, the 5 people at 742 Evergreen Terrace. The horror that the Treehouse keeps returning to, in 100 different configurations and settings and genre references, is the horror that is also the show's deepest subject. The thing it is always circling in the regular episodes without quite looking directly at. What if the family broke? What if the damage was permanent? What if the reset did not happen? What if Homer's injury this time was the one that did not heal? That Marge's forgiveness this time was finally exhausted? That Bart's anger this time was not redirectable back into comedy? That Lisa's loneliness this time tipped into something that could not be managed with a saxophone? What if it ended? The Treehouse says, it ends like this. Here is one way, here is another. Here is a third possibility, a fourth, a fifth. Here are all the ways the family can be torn apart by forces large enough and malevolent enough to accomplish what the ordinary accumulated damage of their lives cannot. And then October ends, and the family is intact, and the Treehouse goes back in its box until next year. But you have seen the versions. You have seen what the family looks like destroyed in all the horror formats the show can imagine. You have been shown the nightmares that the regular show does not allow itself to have. And then you watch the regular show and Homer is fine and Marge is coping and Bart is in trouble and Lisa is lonely and Maggie is watching. And you know now what is being preserved, what is at stake, what the cheerful music and the reset button and the episodic structure are protecting against. The Treehouse of Horror is the show's annual confession. Its admission that beneath the comedy, beneath the satire, beneath the 36 years of cheerful survival, there is a fear. The specific fear of a show that has built a family and spent 3 decades investing in that family, and knows, because all things know this eventually, that the investment is not insured. The family is real. The love is real. The people are real. And real things end. Not in the Treehouse, not in the canonical episodes, not this year or the next. But the fear is real. The show has always known it. And once a year, in October, when the leaves change and the dark comes earlier, and the world is briefly hospitable to the kind of fear that usually stays hidden, The Simpsons puts on its horror special and tells you what it is actually afraid of. The same thing you are afraid of. The family breaking. The people you love being taken from you by forces you cannot defeat. The house going dark. And then November comes, and the family is fine, and the house is lit. And Homer is on the couch, and Marge is in the kitchen, and Bart is on his skateboard, and Lisa is playing her saxophone, and Maggie is watching. All of them watching. All of them there. The fear for another year managed. The family for another year intact. Final reflection. The loop that holds us. We have spent a long time in Springfield tonight. We have walked through the house and examined the rooms. We have sat with Homer and traced the map of his damage. We have watched Marge at the kitchen sink and understood at last what expression it is she has. We have watched Bart on his skateboard moving away from everything and toward the thing he cannot name. We have sat beside Lisa at her window and heard the music she sends out into the dark. We have talked about money and power and the machinery of a company town that keeps its population just comfortable enough to keep and just uncomfortable enough to keep quiet. We have talked about the deaths that stick and the deaths that don't, and what the difference between them reveals about what the show values and what it discards. We have talked about the secondary characters who people the background of Springfield with full, specific, irreducible human lives. We have talked about the marriage that holds the family together and what it costs daily to hold it. And we have talked about October and what the show says in October that it cannot say the rest of the year, and what it is afraid of at the bottom of everything, when the jokes fall away and the reset button is temporarily disabled, and the truth is allowed to surface for 30 minutes before being pressed back down. What we have found, after all of this, is the same thing we started with. A family, imperfect, damaged, sustained by love that is real, and love that is not always adequate, and love that keeps showing up anyway. A family that has survived everything, not because they are resilient in the superhero sense, not because nothing has truly touched them, but because they have chosen to stay together through the touching, through the damage. The Simpsons is not a comedy. We have said this many times and meant it, but let us be precise about what we mean. It is not a comedy in the sense that its primary function is to generate laughter. It has always been more interested in recognition than laughter. In the moment when you watch something on the screen and feel the quiet, private shock of being seen, of watching a cartoon family in a cartoon town doing things that somehow correspond exactly to the most specific, least publicly discussable truths of your own domestic life. Homer falls asleep when he should be listening, and you have been Homer. Marge stands at the sink after everyone else has gone to bed, and you have been Marge. Bart acts up because acting up is the only language available, and you have been Bart. Lisa is right, and no one wants to hear it, and you have been Lisa. Maggie sits in her corner, seeing everything and knowing everything and saying nothing, because saying it would cost too much, and you have been Maggie. This is what the show has been doing for 36 years. Not telling you jokes, showing you yourself in yellow with 4 fingers, in a house that is always slightly broken and always somehow home. And the reason you keep watching, the reason you are here on this late night, in whatever corner of the world you are in, is not the jokes. The jokes are fine, the jokes are good, but the jokes are not why you stay. You stay because of the family, because you have been in that family, because you are in a family, because you love imperfectly and are loved back imperfectly and keep showing up anyway, every morning, to the same kitchen, to the same people, to the same love that is real, even when it is not enough. The Simpsons has been running for 36 years, and it will run for more years still, and every episode will reset at the end, and nobody will age, and the cracked cooling towers will keep leaking, and Homer will keep falling asleep, and Marge will keep standing at the sink. And we will keep watching, not because we cannot look away, because we do not want to look away. Because somewhere in that impossible, contaminated, amnesiac, beautiful, broken town, in that improbable house on Evergreen Terrace, the family is still there. Holding. Always holding. It is late now. Wherever you are, it is late, and the room you are in is quiet, and the people you love are somewhere nearby or somewhere far away. And the day has been whatever it has been, and there is still tonight, and there is still the soft dark of sleep approaching. The Simpsons will be there when you wake up. The family will be intact. Homer will be Homer, and Marge will be Marge, and Bart will be 10, and Lisa will be 8, and Maggie will be watching. The loop turning, the love persisting, the show enduring. Go to sleep now. Springfield will be here when you come back. It always is. That is the whole point. Section 1. Expansion. The Yellow Family. Hiding in plain sight. Continued. Let us slow down here before we move forward, because there is more in the house on Evergreen Terrace than we covered the first time through. More in the details. More in the textures. More in the accumulated specificity of 36 years of returning to the same rooms and finding them always exactly as they were and slightly different in ways that the show rarely announces, but that accrue over time into something that feels impossibly like a lived history. The couch. We talked about the couch gag, the opening signature, the ritual of the family assembling on the couch at the beginning of every episode. But not the couch itself, not what the couch means as an object in the life of this family. The couch is where Homer sleeps. not where he goes to sleep, because Homer does not decide to sleep on the couch. He simply ceases to be conscious in the place where he sat down, and the couch receives him. The couch is the site of Homer's most characteristic form of rest, which is the rest of a person who does not make it to the place where rest is supposed to happen, who is overtaken by the need to stop before the stopping place arrives. There is something deeply human about sleeping on the couch, about the couch as the place where the day catches up with you, where you sat down meaning to watch for just a minute and the warmth of the cushions and the weight of the week converged and you were simply immediately elsewhere. Homer sleeps on the couch the way people sleep on couches, without ceremony, without preparation, with the complete surrender of someone who has run out of energy to manage anything. And the family works around him. Marge puts the blanket on him. The children navigate the room without waking him. The television watches over him. This is the domestic ecology of the couch as sleeping space, and it is the most ordinary thing in the show, and it is also one of the most specific and honest things the show depicts about the way families accommodate the person who needs the most accommodation. The family works around Homer the way water works around a stone, not because the stone is more important than the water, because the water is what is moving. The television in the living room is worth another moment because it has been the show's most consistent prop, its most reliable symbol, its deepest self-referential joke, and also one of its most accurate social observations, all at the same time. The Simpsons are a television family who watch television. The frame is recursive, deliberately so. You are watching a family watch television, and the show has always been aware of what this does to the relationship between the audience and the subject. When Homer sits in front of the television and disappears into it, the show is asking you to notice that you are doing the same thing. That the couch and the screen and the disappearance into the warm dark of broadcast are not specific to Homer. They are specific to all of us. The television is the family's collective space in a way that the dining table once was in an older domestic economy. The family gathers around it. They are physically together in front of it. They are not necessarily emotionally together. Homer is fully absorbed. Bart is half absorbed and half doing something else. Lisa is watching with the critical attention of someone who is not going to let the television off easy. Marge is watching with the warm tolerance of someone who has made peace with the television's role in the household. But they are in the same room, sharing the same light. And this shared physical presence, this casual proximity, is something. It is not nothing. It is what the television replaced, and it is something less than what it replaced, and it is still something. The family is in the same room, and in the room, under the shared light of the shared screen, something of the family continues to cohere. This is the show's quiet argument about television and community. Not that television is good for families, not that the couch is a substitute for the table, but that the things families do together, even imperfect things, even passive things, generate a kind of connection that is less than what we imagine, but more than nothing. Homer and the television is the show's most honest portrait of escapism. Homer does not watch television critically, or analytically, or even particularly consciously. He watches it the way you eat something when you are not actually hungry. Because it is there. Because it fills the moment. Because the alternative to filling the moment is experiencing it, and experiencing the unmediated reality of your life requires a quality of attention that Homer's damaged brain does not always have available. The television is where Homer goes when the world is too much, which is often because the world is generally too much for Homer. The plant, the children, the bills, the expectations, the awareness, however dim and however suppressed, that the gap between who he is and who he should be has not closed and will not close. All of this generates a background pressure that needs somewhere to go. The television absorbs it. The television is the pressure valve of 742 Evergreen Terrace, doing for the household the same job that the Treehouse of Horror does for the show. It takes the pressure. It holds it. It returns Homer, briefly, to something manageable. And the family gathers around it, and the show watches them gather. And you watch the show. And the recursion spirals, gently, into the warm dark. The neighborhood, not just the house. Because Springfield is not just the plant and the economy and the institutional dysfunction. It is also Evergreen Terrace. The specific street where the specific family lives, surrounded by the specific neighbors whose proximity has shaped the family's life in ways the show has been documenting across 3 decades. Ned Flanders next door, yes, but also the Hibberts, the doctor and his family, whose comfortable middle-class existence offers a contrast to the Simpsons' perpetual near-crisis. The Van Houtens, whose marriage the show has used as a cautionary variation on the Simpsons' marriage. What happens when the relationship breaks rather than bending? The Lovejoys, whose religion provides the institutional version of what Ned's religion provides at the individual level. A framework for managing the world's complexity that is sometimes comforting and sometimes a straitjacket. The neighborhood is a community, imperfect, dysfunctional in its specific Springfield way, occasionally cruel and occasionally generous, always present. The neighbors know things about the Simpsons that the Simpsons would prefer they did not know, and the Simpsons know things about the neighbors that the neighbors maintain with the effort of people who are not entirely sure their own self-presentation is secure. This is how neighborhoods actually work. The proximity forces a knowledge of each other that privacy would prevent. You see the lights on at 3 in the morning, you hear the argument through the kitchen window. You notice when the car is gone for 3 days and comes back with a dent. The neighborhood is an involuntary intimacy that most people manage by maintaining the fiction that they are not paying that close attention. The Simpsons neighborhood is this, made visible, made comedic, usually, made occasionally honest in the way that comedy can be honest when it is not working too hard to protect you from what it is showing you. The street is the family's extended context. The house is the center, the town is the frame, and inside the frame, inside the house, inside the family, the 5 yellow people who have been living this life for 36 years. Who were here when you first sat down to watch, and who are here now, and who will be here when you come back. That is the thing about The Simpsons that makes it different from anything else the medium has produced. Not the longevity, though the longevity is real and remarkable. Not the quality, which varies, which has always varied, which is beside the point. The thing that makes it different is the depth of familiarity, the specific quality of knowledge that comes from 36 years of returning to the same family in the same house on the same street. You know these people. Not the way you know characters you admire or find interesting or find useful as vehicles for a story. The way you know family. The way you know the texture of a specific person's specific presence. The way Homer's specific quality of being in a room is distinct from any other person's specific quality of being in a room. You know him, you know Marge, you know Bart and Lisa and Maggie in the way that you know people you have been with for a very long time, people who have become as familiar as furniture and more essential than furniture, people whose absence would leave a specific shape of absence that nothing else could fill. This is what the show built over 36 years. Not a franchise, a family. And you are in it. You have always been in it. That is why you are here on this late night, in your quiet room, with the world outside doing whatever the world is doing. You came home. Section 2. Expansion. Homer's brain continued. There is something else about Homer that the show rarely examines directly, but that sits underneath every episode as a kind of structural irony. Homer is better at his life than he should be. Not in the grand sense, not in the sense of achievement or status or the kinds of markers that the world uses to measure a life. In those registers, Homer is objectively failing at a level that would constitute crisis in a more consequence-attentive narrative. He has held hundreds of jobs and failed at most of them. He has made financial decisions that would bankrupt a more conventional family. He has damaged property and relationships and civic infrastructure on a scale that should have resulted in lasting repercussions. But none of this has broken him. None of it has, as they say, touched him. And the reason it has not touched him is not purely cartoon logic. It is something more specific to Homer's character, something that the show keeps returning to without quite articulating. Homer has an extraordinary capacity for presence. Not the mindful presence of someone who has cultivated the ability through meditation or therapy or the deliberate practice of attention. The presence of someone who simply does not carry the past forward in the way that most people do. Homer's relationship with his own history is, and this is a direct consequence of the damage to his brain, surprisingly clean. He does not lie awake reviewing his failures. He does not replay the embarrassments. He does not build the elaborate internal monologue of self-criticism and retrospective mortification that constitutes a significant portion of most people's mental lives. Homer does not torture himself. This is not wisdom, it is brain damage. But the effect is the same as wisdom in one specific way. Homer is not carrying the weight of his own past on top of the weight of his present. He experiences the present at something close to face value without the interpretive layer of comparison to how it should be going based on everything that has already gone wrong. This is the thing that allows him to be happy in circumstances that should not allow happiness. The donut is good because the donut is the donut, not because it is better or worse than the last donut, or than the donuts he should have been able to afford if he had made different choices. The beer at Moe's is the beer at Moe's, present and real and cold, without the accretion of everything else. Homer's happiness is the happiness of someone who is not comparing the present to an alternative. Not because he has achieved the equanimity that makes comparison unnecessary, but because his brain does not do comparison efficiently. The machinery for sustained retrospective assessment is impaired, and the impairment in this specific way functions as a gift. But there is a cost to this, and the show has occasionally made it explicit. Homer cannot learn, not because he is incapable of it in the neurological sense, but because learning, in the meaningful sense, requires the retention of the past experience in a form precise enough to inform the future decision. It requires remembering what happened last time and allowing that memory to shape the choice this time. Homer does not do this reliably. He makes the same mistakes. He has the same realizations. He delivers the same heartfelt apologies with the same genuine emotion. And the emotion is real, and the apology is sincere, and by next episode the mistake is fresh again. This is the core tragedy of the Homer-Marge relationship. Not that Homer does not love her. He does. And the love is enormous and genuine. But that the love does not prevent the repetition. Cannot prevent it because the repetition is structural. It is built into the architecture of Homer's brain. He is not choosing to repeat the mistakes. He is simply incapable of the sustained learning that would prevent them. And Marge knows this. She has always known this. And she has made the decision, continuously, that this limitation does not change what Homer is worth to her. That the love is worth the frustration, that the genuine is worth the repeated. This is not resignation. This is one of the most generous things one person can do for another. To understand the shape of their limitation and to love them through it rather than against it. To not require them to be different from what they are in order to deserve the love you are giving them. Marge gives Homer this. Every episode. Every reset. It is in the end the largest thing she does. Larger than the cooking and the cleaning and the managing of the household. Larger than the patience and the endurance and the forgiveness. She loves Homer as he is. Not as he should be. Not as he could be if the crayon were removed permanently and the radiation damage were repaired, and the childhood wound were healed and the brain chemistry were functional. As he is. This specific, damaged, warm, improbable man. As he is today in this episode, with all of his limitations intact. The generosity of this is staggering when you let yourself see it. And Homer, in his impaired and genuine way, knows it. Not consciously, not in the form of an articulated appreciation that he can express in words, but in the specific tenderness of his most unguarded moments with her. In the way he looks at her when she is not looking. In the way his body orients toward her in a room, instinctively, without thought, the way a plant orients toward light. Homer loves Marge with his whole brain, such as it is. And the whole brain, such as it is, turns out to be enough. Now, Homer and work. Because we cannot talk about Homer without talking about the plant, and we cannot talk about the plant without talking about what Homer's relationship with it reveals about the specific psychology of a person who works somewhere terrible for decades and cannot leave. Homer does not like his job. This is not in question. He has expressed, across hundreds of episodes, his distaste for the plant, his boredom at his workstation, his resentment of Burns' authority, his specific misery during the long hours between the donut and the end of the shift. But Homer does not quit. The show offers various explanations for this. The financial necessity, obviously. The deal between Burns and Abe that guarantees Homer's employment as long as he stays. The cognitive impairment that makes it difficult for Homer to plan and execute a significant life change. All of these are true, but there is something else. The plant is the structure of Homer's day. It is the thing that gives the hours their shape. Wake up, go to work, sit at the workstation, eat the donut, watch the safety monitor without really watching it. Come home. The structure is oppressive, but it is structure, and structure for a person whose internal regulation is as compromised as Homer's is not nothing. The plant tells Homer when to be where. It removes a category of decision from his day. It provides the external skeleton that Homer's damaged brain cannot always provide for itself. And Homer, who has built his life around the compensation strategies that make the limitation manageable, has incorporated the plant's structure into those strategies without articulating this or perhaps even knowing it. This is common. This is something many people do without examining it. Staying in a bad situation not purely because of fear or laziness or financial need, but because the bad situation provides something, some scaffolding, some reliable daily context that the unknown of change does not guarantee. The devil you know. The bad job that is at least a job, the unhappy situation that is at least a situation. Homer stays at the plant partly because the plant is his, because he has been there for decades, and the workstation is his workstation, and Lenny and Carl are his, and Moe's after work is his, and the whole dailiness of his professional life has become a constitutive part of who he is, in a way that would survive the job's financial function, even if the financial function were removed. This is the plant's hold on Homer that Burns did not engineer, the hold that grew up naturally, over decades of shared space and shared routine. The hold of the familiar. Homer stays because the plant is part of him now, as much as the couch and the television and the kitchen where Marge is making dinner. The plant is home in the way that terrible places become home when you have been in them long enough to stop seeing them clearly. And the plant, in its cracked and leaking way, is also Homer's. The one place where, despite everything, despite the safety violations and the radiation and the $600 a year that Burns spent on Homer's healthcare while paying himself tens of millions, Homer Simpson has a place and a role and a name on the wall. Safety Inspector Homer Simpson. The name is on the wall. He is there. Section 3. Expansion. Marge. The Architecture of Endurance. Continued. The relationship between Marge and her own ambition is one of the most consistently and carefully drawn things in the show's entire run, and it deserves more time than we gave it the first pass through. Because Marge has ambitions. She has always had ambitions. The show has given her repeated glimpses of this. Not dramatic ambitions, not the kind that make for a simple narrative of a woman choosing between her family and her career. The specific, modest, genuinely felt ambitions of a person who suspects there is more she is capable of than the context she is in will allow her to discover. The painting. We mentioned the painting. But let us stay with it longer. Because the painting is not just a hobby or a side plot or a vehicle for an episode's worth of story. The painting is the one place in Marge's life where she makes something, where she takes what is inside her, the specific register of her feeling and her observation and her sense of how the world looks, and produces something that did not exist before she produced it. The rest of Marge's life is, in large measure, maintenance. The maintenance of the house, the maintenance of the family, the maintenance of the relationships and the systems, and the emotional ecology of a household in perpetual need of tending. Maintenance is not nothing. Maintenance is essential. The house falls apart without it. The family frays without it. Marge's maintenance is the condition of possibility for everything else the family does. But maintenance does not make things. Maintenance keeps things. And Marge, at some level she cannot fully articulate, knows the difference between keeping and making, and knows which one she has more of. When she paints, she makes. And the making produces in her a quality of satisfaction that is different from the satisfaction of maintenance. More private, more hers. The satisfaction of having added something to the world rather than having preserved what was already there. The show does not always honor this. The painting episodes tend to follow a particular pattern. Marge discovers or rediscovers her talent. It is celebrated or at least acknowledged. Something intervenes to end the painting period, and she returns to the household. The painting goes back into the basement, but here is what the show does not say and what you notice if you are watching carefully. The paintings accumulate. Across all the painting episodes, across the various times that Marge has painted and then stopped painting, there are more canvases, more things that she made. More evidence that the making has not stopped entirely, that it continues in the spaces between the episodes, in the late evenings after the children are asleep, and before Homer has noticed that she is in the spare room with the brushes. Marge paints in secret. She has always painted in secret, at least some of the time. Because the painting is hers. Because it belongs to the part of her that is not wife or mother or homemaker. The part that is just Marge. And that part requires protection. It requires the specific privacy that things require when they are too important to risk exposing to the casual attention of people who might not treat them carefully. This is not a statement about her family's intentions. Homer loves the paintings when he sees them. The children are proud of them, in their specific ways. But Marge paints in secret because the act of painting is the act of being herself, and being herself is something she does privately, in the early morning or the late evening, when the performance of the other selves can be briefly suspended. The performance of the other selves. This phrase deserves a moment, because Marge is performing in the technical sense that she is presenting a particular version of herself for the benefit of others. Not deceptively. She is not concealing a false self or deceiving anyone about her fundamental character. But the Marge who makes lunches and manages the household budget and navigates the social ecosystem of Springfield and maintains the specific presentation of cheerful competence that the role of mother and homemaker requires. That Marge is a performance. A sustained, sincere, well-executed performance, but a performance nonetheless. Most of what we do in our roles is performance. The performance is real. The sincerity with which it is executed is real. But beneath the performance is the person who is performing, and that person is not identical to the performance. The Marge who makes lunches is Marge, but so is the Marge who stands at the kitchen sink at night with no one watching, having the expression with no name. The show has always been aware of this duality. The show built Marge with this duality and has depicted it with more honesty and more consistency than most shows give to the inner lives of female characters who are, nominally, the supporting character to a bumbling male lead. Marge is not a supporting character. She is the show's other spine. Homer is the comic engine. Marge is the moral and emotional anchor. The show runs on both of them, the comedy and the truth, and it could not run without either. Her relationship with her sisters, Patty and Selma, is where the show has occasionally been most honest about the alternative version of Marge's life. The life she might have had if she had made different choices, or if circumstances had made different choices for her. Patty and Selma are not happy. The show is not tender about this. They are bitter to varying degrees about their lives. They love their sister, and they resent her choices. They are good people in their way, who have been disappointed by the world and have organized their presentation of themselves around that disappointment in a way that makes them funny and makes them difficult and makes them occasionally the most honest voices in any room they enter. Patty and Selma have not been required to sustain the performance that Marge sustains. They do not have children or husbands who require management. They have each other, and they have their own dissatisfactions. And they have, underneath everything, their love for Marge, which is the most consistent and genuine emotion they express. And when Patty and Selma look at Marge's life, what they see is partly the triumph they tell themselves they reject, the house, the family, the love that is real even when it is imperfect, and partly the cautionary tale they use to justify their own choices, and partly the person they know from the inside, the Marge who was there before Homer, who's still there, underneath the wife and mother, who is standing at the kitchen sink at night, having the expression with no name. They see all of this, and they love her through it, and they make it impossible for her, which is also love. The specific love of people who will not let you simplify yourself, who will not let you pretend the expression does not exist, who will not let you forget that you are a person in addition to a role. Patty and Selma are Marge's most difficult gift, the thing that keeps her honest. And the blue hair, one more time, because we are not done with the blue hair. The blue hair is a choice Marge makes every morning, not just the maintenance of a style, the renewal of a decision. She wakes up and she is, first, Marge. The natural-haired Marge with the gray coming in and the private self sitting quietly in the morning before the day's performance begins. And then she makes the hair happen, and the blue tower rises, and Marge, the homemaker and the mother, and the wife steps into the day. The transformation is daily. The hair is not who she is. The hair is who she decides to be, again, each morning. And the decision, made 36 years running, is its own form of courage. Not because the style is courageous, because the decision is. Because she looks at the life she has chosen and chooses it again every morning in the specific way that the blue hair represents. Yes. This, again, yes. The architecture of Marge's endurance is not passive. It is not the endurance of someone who has stopped having choices. It is the endurance of someone who makes the same choice daily, with full awareness of what it costs and what it provides, and does not flinch. Marge is the bravest person in Springfield. She is brave in the way that is hardest to see, which is to say quietly, in the way that does not announce itself and does not require an audience, in the way that continues whether or not anyone is watching, which is to say the blue hair goes up and the kitchen comes to life and the family comes to breakfast and the day begins again, which is to say the expression at the kitchen sink resolves into something that looks like morning, which is to say Marge Simpson, 36 years running, shows up and holds. Section 4. Expansion. Bart continued. The relationship between Bart and his teachers is one of the more carefully observed things in the show's depiction of institutional education. And it is worth a long moment because it tells you something true about what classrooms do to children who do not fit the categories they were built for. Mrs. Krabappel. Edna Krabappel, who taught 4th grade at Springfield Elementary for the show's first 23 seasons, and whose death in 2014 coincided with the death of the actress who voiced her, Marcia Wallace, and was handled by the show with a dignity and a grief that the character deserved. Mrs. Krabappel was, in the taxonomy of sitcom teachers, supposed to be the antagonist, the burned-out, chain-smoking, romantic disappointment accumulating, too old for this 4th grade teacher who exists as a foil for Bart's defiance. And she was all of those things. The show gave her all of those things and made comedy from them. But she was also something else. She was a person who, in the specific way of people who have stayed in their profession past the point of idealism, had achieved a kind of honest assessment of her students that the more idealistic teacher cannot manage. She was not fooled by Bart. She was not charmed by Bart. But she also was not cruel to Bart in the way that a lesser version of the character would be. She was, in her way, honest with him about his potential and his waste of it, and the specific sadness of watching a kid who could be something refuse to be it. There is a layer of Mrs. Krabappel's relationship with Bart that the show touches on and then retreats from because it would make the comedy too uncomfortable. She recognizes him, not just as a student or a problem, as a person. A specific, complicated, not easily categorized person who does not fit the classroom the way the classroom expects its students to fit, and who is being systematically failed by a system that cannot accommodate his specific shape. She gives him Fs. She gives him dozens of Fs across the run of the show. And the Fs are accurate, in the narrow sense that they reflect his performance on the tasks the system set him. But they are also, in the larger sense, the specific product of a system that evaluated Bart on terms he was never going to meet and called the evaluation objective. Mrs. Krabappel knows this. She is not naive. She has been in that classroom too long to be naive about what the grades measure and what they miss. And there is, in the show's more honest moments with her, a weight to the grading that is not the weight of a teacher who does not care. The opposite. The weight of a teacher who cares too much and has no tools that fit this particular student and has been watching the failure accumulate for years without a solution. The show honored her at the end. When she died, when the show acknowledged her absence with a simple, quiet card that said only, "We will miss you, Mrs. K," the specific grief of that card was the grief of losing a character who had been a person, not a prop, not a set piece, a person who had been built across 23 seasons into something that had genuine weight. Bart's relationship with Springfield Elementary, more broadly, is the show's most detailed portrait of how institutions process children who don't fit. The grading system, the detention system, the principal's office, the threat of being held back. All of these are the machinery of an educational institution trying to process a student who does not move through it efficiently, who jams the machinery, who requires again and again specific interventions that the machinery was not designed to provide. And the show's implicit argument in the accumulation of all these Bart and school episodes is not that Bart is right to resist the school. He is not right exactly. The school represents things that have genuine value: literacy, numeracy, the capacity to exist in institutional contexts without constant conflict. And Bart's resistance to these things costs him real capability that he would be better off having. But the school is also wrong. Wrong in the specific way of institutions that process difference as deficiency, that see the student who does not fit the mold as broken rather than as evidence that the mold needs examining. That measure a student's value by their performance on the metrics the institution has decided to measure and call the result a comprehensive assessment. Bart is not deficient. The school is narrow. Both things are true. They are not in conflict. The show does not resolve this tension. It does not arrive at a simple moral about educational reform or individual responsibility or the best way to handle a kid who is simultaneously smart and failing. It holds the tension, episode after episode, and the tension is productive. It is the show telling you something real about the relationship between individual human beings and the institutions that are supposed to serve them, which is that institutions, even well-intentioned ones, are built to serve the average case, and that the cases that deviate significantly from average will fall through the gaps, and that falling through the gaps does not make you worthless. Bart keeps falling through the gaps. Bart keeps showing up. The skateboard is still at the wall. Yeah, but yeah. Section 5. Expansion. Lisa, continued. Let us talk about Lisa and anger, because the show has given her anger and has not always known what to do with it, and the uncertainty reveals something important. Lisa is angry. Not in the broad, performed way that anger is allowed to look in female characters in mainstream entertainment. Not the righteous fury of the wronged woman. Not the passionate outburst of the girl who finally spoke her truth. Lisa's anger is quieter, more structural, more continuous. It is the specific anger of a child who is right about things the world does not want to hear, who is told repeatedly and in various ways to be quieter about being right, who has watched the things she was right about play out exactly as she predicted, and who must then absorb the frustration of being right without vindication. Being right without vindication is one of the more corrosive emotional experiences available. It produces a specific kind of frustration that has nowhere to go because the targets of the frustration are diffuse. Not one person or one institution, but the whole aggregate shape of a world that organizes itself around the comfortable rather than the accurate. Lisa's anger has this shape. It is not hot. It does not burst out in dramatic scenes or not usually. It is more like a sustained pressure, a pressure that the saxophone absorbs, that the books absorb, that the occasional speech to an unlistening audience absorbs. And then sometimes it does not hold. The episodes where Lisa's composure breaks, where the frustration accumulates past the tolerance of even her extraordinary capacity to manage it, are among the show's most memorable moments with her character. Because when Lisa breaks, it is not a tantrum. It is not the superficial frustration of someone who did not get what they wanted. It is the breaking open of a genuine and deep grief about what is, about what should be manatai, about the gap between the world as it is and the world as it could be if the people in it were willing to look. The show has sometimes played these moments for comedy. The Lisa losing her composure episode can be structured as funny, because Lisa being right and furious about it is an inherently comedic shape, the righteous child versus the oblivious world. But in the best of these episodes, the comedy is transparent. You can see through it to the real thing, which is a child who is carrying more than a child should carry, whose composure has been constructed to contain the pressure of being too aware too early, and who breaks open not because she is weak, but because she is human. Lisa's relationship with the town of Springfield is the show's most direct statement about the experience of being the wrong kind of intelligent in the wrong place. Not the pragmatic intelligence that the town rewards, Burns's strategic intelligence, the mechanic's operational intelligence, the coach's athletic intelligence. Lisa's intelligence is the kind that questions, that interrogates, that refuses to accept the explanation that has always been given and demands a better one. This kind of intelligence is threatening to communities organized around the comfortable lie. Springfield is organized around comfortable lies. Lisa is constitutionally incapable of maintaining them. The result is that Springfield does not quite know what to do with Lisa Simpson. It celebrates her in the abstract. She wins contests and is occasionally recognized as the most talented child in her school and her city and her state. But in the concrete, in the dailiness, it does not give her what she needs. It does not give her peers. It does not give her the community of similarly inclined minds that her intelligence and her feeling require. It gives her ribbons and trophies and the occasional condescending adult attention, and then it returns to its comfortable lies. Lisa is the town's conscience, not its hero. Consciences are not celebrated. They are tolerated at best and resented, usually, and never given what they need, which is not recognition, but genuine engagement. Someone who will push back with equal force. Someone who will argue at her level. Someone who will not fold when she makes the point that the comfortable narrative cannot accommodate. The show has given her these people occasionally. Guest teachers, visiting scholars, her fellow students in brief episodes. And in those episodes, Lisa visibly relaxes into something that looks like happiness, or at least like the particular satisfaction of being challenged, of finding the conversation that is worth having. And then those people leave, and she is back in Springfield, and the saxophone takes up the work again. Lisa is 8 years old, and she has been 8 years old for 36 years. And she has been carrying the weight of Springfield's refusal to look clearly for all of those years, and she is tired of it in a bone-deep way that the show occasionally allows itself to show. And she plays the saxophone, and it goes out the window, and Springfield absorbs it, and she plays again. Section 6. Expansion, the hidden economy of Springfield, continued. Let us talk about the specific texture of financial anxiety in the Simpson household, because the show has always been a show about money, in the way that shows about money never openly announce that they are. The recurring plot of Homer needing to take a second job is one of the most consistently honest things in The Simpsons run. Not because second jobs are themselves particularly dramatic or revealing, but because the specific shape of Homer's second jobs, the variety of them, the desperation that generates them, and the way they always collapse, is a portrait of the gig economy before the gig economy had that name. Homer drives a limousine. Homer works at a Quickie Mart franchise. Homer sells grease. Homer enters professional competitions in fields he knows nothing about. Homer invents things. Homer becomes a bodyguard, a food critic, a roadie, a military recruitment officer, a snowplow operator, a pedicab driver. The list extends for pages across 36 seasons, and the shape of it is always the same. The initial opportunity seems real. Homer takes it with genuine enthusiasm, with the specific giddy energy of someone who has found a thing that might solve the problem. For a period, usually most of an episode, the second job works. Homer is good at it, or good enough, or the job provides what the household needs, and there is a brief window where the financial pressure eases and Homer's sense of himself as a provider is restored. And then something goes wrong. The bottom falls out. The job reveals itself as unsustainable, or Homer reveals himself as unsuited to sustaining it, or the external market that the job depends on shifts in ways that Homer cannot control or predict. And he is back at the plant, back at the one job that cannot fire him, that cannot dissolve under pressure, that will always be there at the end of every second job episode because the deal between Burns and Abe guarantees it. Homer always has the plant to come back to, and the plant's guaranteed permanence is both the safety net and the trap. The thing that catches him when the second job fails is also the thing that makes the second job feel less urgent than it might otherwise feel, because Homer knows, at some level below articulate thought, that the fall will have a bottom. The financial anxiety is real. The second jobs are real responses to real pressure. But the resolution, the return to the plant, has a quality of inevitability that the real gig economy does not allow. Real gig workers do not have a guaranteed job to return to when the app economy disappoints. Real families in the specific economic stratum the Simpsons inhabit do not have the safety net of a nepotistic sinecure arranged by their grandfather. Homer has this. And it is both the thing that makes his life survivable and the thing that keeps his life exactly as it is. The trap, the comfort, the thing that prevents the fall and also prevents the flight. The financial scenes, Marge going through the household accounts at the kitchen table, the specific dread of a bill that is larger than expected, the family conference about how to manage the gap between income and necessary expenditure. These scenes are the show at its most direct. They are the moments where the comedy drops most completely, where what you are watching is not satire or exaggeration, but the accurate documentation of a specific economic experience. Most American families know this table, the one where the bills are spread out and the numbers are added and the result does not quite work. The one where the question of what to cut, what to delay, what to ignore for one more month is asked and asked again. The one where the distance between what you need and what you have is measured in the specific, private arithmetic of household survival. The Simpsons sits at this table regularly, and the show does not make it easy, and it does not make it funny. In the episodes where it takes the subject seriously, it makes it accurate. It makes it the thing that is actually there, in the texture of American domestic life, at the economic stratum the show depicts, the stratum that is not poverty and is not comfort, but is the perpetual management of the gap between them. Burns, in his mansion, does not sit at this table. Burns has never sat at this table. The specific anxiety that defines the economic life of the families on Evergreen Terrace is not available to him. He has more money than he can meaningfully spend, more money than his century plus of conscious existence has allowed him to fully exhaust. And this superabundance has its own effects on his psychology, its own forms of distortion, its own particular alienation from the texture of ordinary human experience. Burns does not understand what money feels like to the people at the kitchen table. He knows what it buys. He does not know what it feels like to not have it. And this gap in his understanding, this specific blind spot, is the thing that makes him genuinely dangerous, more dangerous than any actively malicious person could be. Because malice can be anticipated and defended against. The indifference of someone who cannot imagine your situation does not announce itself. It simply produces decisions that feel to Burns like simple, rational choices, and that feel to the Simpsons like the ground moving under their feet for no apparent reason. Burns raises rates. Burns cuts benefits. Burns defers maintenance that affects the safety of the workers and the surrounding community. Not out of cruelty, out of the simple, clean arithmetic of a man for whom numbers are numbers, and the human cost of numbers is not a category his spreadsheet has a column for. The kitchen table knows the difference. Burns doesn't know the kitchen table. This is the economy of Springfield. It is the economy of America, rendered in yellow. Let us talk about what the town's economy has done to community in Springfield, because community is what the economy ultimately shapes, beyond the individual households and the specific financial anxieties. Springfield has a community. It has a dysfunctional, eccentric, occasionally mob-minded, often kind, perpetually entertaining community of people who have been shaped by the same forces and who, because of this, understand each other in ways that are not entirely expressible in language. This understanding is the thing that makes Springfield feel like a real place, despite everything. Despite the impossible geography and the supernatural occurrences and the celebrity visits and the consistent violation of physical law. Springfield feels like a real place because its people feel like real people, and real people feel like real people because of the specifically shared context that shapes them. The people of Springfield have all drunk the same water. They have all watched the same cracked cooling towers on the same horizon. They have all worked for or feared working for, or been related to someone who worked for Burns, who has cast his shadow over this community for over a century. They have all gone to the same Springfield Elementary, underfunded and overcrowded and staffed by teachers who stay, because leaving would be like admitting that the place they gave their professional life to was not worth giving it to. They have all stood in line at the same quick E-Mart, and bought the same overpriced convenience items and made small talk with the same Apu. This is community, not the idealized version, the real version. The version that is produced not by choice or common affinity, but by shared circumstance. By being in the same place, subject to the same forces, managed by the same inadequate institutions. And the community has value. The show has always known this, has always depicted it with a warm specificity that resists the easier satirical choice of simply dismissing Springfield as a place of comic dysfunction. Springfield is dysfunctional. Springfield is also a community of people who look after each other, imperfectly and conditionally but genuinely, who bring casseroles when someone is sick, who attend the school play even when it is terrible, who riot at the drop of a hat, but also, sometimes, pull together with an earnestness that complicates the riot. The community coexists with the dysfunction. The warmth coexists with the damage. The genuine affection that Springfield's residents feel for each other coexists with the collective forgetting and the institutional corruption and the economic exploitation. This is true. This is how real communities work. The warmth and the damage are not in opposition. They are the same community, expressing itself in different registers at different times. Springfield is not a failure. It is a portrait. Section 7. Expansion. Deaths and catastrophes. Continued. There is a specific category of Simpsons episode that does not get enough attention in the larger conversation about the show's quality and ambition, and that category is the episode that takes its B-plot seriously. Every Simpsons episode has an A-plot, and usually a B-plot, and the A-plot is where the comedy and the main action live, and the B-plot is traditionally where the show puts the things it does not have room for in the A-plot but cannot bear to leave out. The secondary character development, the ambient social observation, the thing that is too small and too specific for the main story, but that is exactly the right size for the texture it adds to the world of the show. The B-plots of The Simpsons, across 36 years, constitute a secondary document of Springfield that is as rich and as honest as the A-plots, but that reaches different territory. Because the A-plot is under pressure, it has to move, has to deliver, has to be funny enough to carry the episode. The B-plot has space, the B-plot can breathe. And in the breathing, it sometimes says things the A-plot cannot. The B-plot that takes Marge's anxiety seriously for 12 minutes, while Homer is busy with the main story. The B-plot that follows Bart into a consequence the show does not resolve by the end of the episode, but simply holds there, unresolved, a fact about a child that the comedy cannot entirely absorb. The B-plot that gives a secondary character, Apu, or Ned, or Wiggum, the space to be briefly, specifically, painfully real before the A-plot reasserts itself and everything returns to its baseline. These B-plots are the show at its most honest. They are the show when it is not trying to be good television and is instead simply observing, watching, letting the camera rest on a face for a moment longer than the comedy requires and seeing what is there when the requirement is suspended. The deaths in these B-plots are often the most significant deaths. Not the big deaths, the flagged ones, the ones the show announces with swelling music and devoted episode time. The quiet deaths. The death of a background character mentioned in passing. The death of a relationship depicted in a single scene without resolution or commentary. The death of a hope, shown not in dramatic failure but in the specific, subtle rearrangement of a face that has accepted that something is not going to happen. The Simpsons has been recording these quiet deaths for 36 years, and they accumulate. They accumulate into a portrait of what it means to live in a place and to age, or not age, as the floating timeline demands, in that place and to watch the small things die around you, without any of them being large enough to justify the grief that all of them together earn. This is the texture of life in a community over time. Not the big events, the small ones. The things that happen between the episodes, in the background of the episodes, in the B-plots that do not make the highlight reel. The show has documented this texture more thoroughly than almost any other piece of American television. And the document is there in the 36 seasons of accumulated B-plots and background moments and the quiet faces of secondary characters caught in the pause between one joke and the next. Frank Grimes one more time because he is the hinge on which the entire question of consequence in Springfield turns. Grimes is not killed by malice. He is not killed by accident. He is killed by the logic of Springfield. By the specific impossibility of maintaining the belief that effort and merit and the rules as stated will produce the outcomes they promise in a place that has never actually operated according to the rules as stated. Grimes imports the logic of the real world into a place that runs on different physics, and the collision between those two logics is fatal. Not metaphorically, literally. Grimes dies because he cannot reconcile the world he was told he lived in with the world he is actually, and the show has never fully reckoned with what Grimes's death means. It has used him as a touchstone, occasionally a reference point in conversations about Springfield's relationship to consequence, but it has not extended the argument. It has not asked what it means for a community when the people who expect the rules to work are the ones who are destroyed by their own expectations. The answer, the one the show does not give but that the episode implies, is that Springfield is only survivable for people who have made peace with the absence of the rules. Who have accepted that the normal logic of cause and effect, effort and reward, behavior and consequence, does not apply here in the way it would apply somewhere else. Homer has made this peace, not deliberately, not through wisdom, but through the specific design of his brain. He cannot maintain the expectation that the rules apply because he cannot maintain the cognitive machinery that would generate and sustain that expectation. He lives in Springfield's actual physics, not the physics that were advertised. Grimes could not do this. Grimes's brain worked well enough to hold the expectation, clearly enough to see the contradiction, and fragile enough to be shattered by the collision between them. Homer's impairment is his protection. Grimes's functionality was his destruction. This is Springfield's darkest theorem, and the show stated it clearly in Season 8 and then moved on. It is still there, waiting to be fully reckoned with. Section 8. Expansion, Side Characters, Continued. Let us talk about Apu for a moment longer, because the cultural conversation about his character in the last decade of the show has been loud and has not always found the most interesting things to say. Apu Nahasapi Mapetalon is a caricature. The accent, the name, the specific combination of conveniences and cultural signifiers that constitute his character. These are drawn broadly in the way of all the characters on the show, but with a broadness that has a specific and uncomfortable cultural shape. The show has acknowledged this in its way, and the character has been reduced in prominence as a result. But Apu is also, within the show's universe, a person. And the person the show built beneath the caricature and through it is a person of genuine dignity and genuine complexity. He is educated, a Ph.D. the show has established, which is another one of those details that sits in the background of the comedy like a small, quiet refutation of its own surface reading. He is devoted to his work, to his family, to the specific enterprise of the Quick E-Mart as a project that is his. He is, in his way, a portrait of the immigrant experience that is more complicated than the caricature it is delivered in. The complications: he has given everything to a business model that exploits him. He works for the Quick E-Mart Corporation, which has its own corporate overlords who have built their empire on the specific labor of the Apus of the world. The franchise operators who carry the cost and the risk and the round-the-clock investment, while the corporation retains the upside. He is, in the economic sense, a company man whose company is using him, which makes his story, stripped of its cultural caricature, a story about the same thing the plant is about for Homer: the specific exploitation of the worker who has invested too much in the enterprise to leave. Apu cannot leave the Quick E-Mart. He has 8 children and a franchise and 2 decades of his life in the building. The Quick E-Mart is not just his job. It is the form his American dream took, and regardless of what the corporation does to him, the form is what he has. This is not unique to immigrants, but it resonates differently for immigrants, because the investment has a specific quality of totality that is characteristic of people who staked everything on this country and this life and this specific form of success. Apu bet everything on America. The Quick E-Mart is the return on that bet. Even if the return is inadequate, the show has never quite articulated this. It has circled it and touched it and suggested it in the episodes that take Apu seriously. But the broadness of the caricature has made it hard to see clearly, has required a kind of interpretive charity that the show should not require the viewer to supply. The character deserved more precision in the drawing, more dignity in the framing, more care in the design. But within what the show actually built, there is a person. And the person's story is, at its core, the story of the show. A person who bet everything on something, who built a life on the bet, and who cannot leave because the bet is the life. Chief Wiggum. Chief Wiggum is the show's portrait of institutional authority in a state of cheerful dysfunction, and the portrait is more interesting than the comedy makes it appear. Wiggum is incompetent. This is the show's primary statement about him. He is a bad police chief in every measurable sense. His investigations go nowhere. His enforcement is selective and inconsistent. His judgment is reliably wrong. His officers are worse than he is in specific ways that compound, rather than compensate for his own deficiencies. But Wiggum loves his son. He loves Ralph, his strange, specific, deeply lovable son, with a completeness and a devotion that the show treats with surprising tenderness given the surrounding comedy. The Wiggum-Ralph relationship is one of the show's most quietly moving things. A father who is bad at his job and probably not good enough for the institutional responsibility he has been given, who is simply and completely devoted to his child in ways that have nothing to do with competence or authority or any of the institutional categories that define him professionally. Ralph is different. The show has never fully specified how Ralph is different, which is wise because the specificity would reduce him to a category when the ambiguity allows him to remain a person. Ralph says things that are not connected to the conversation around him. Ralph perceives the world through a different lens. Ralph isn't in the specific way of children who experience the world unusually, both deeply strange and deeply honest in ways that the socially calibrated children around him cannot access. Wiggum loves Ralph's strangeness, not despite it, partly because of it. Because Ralph, who does not navigate the social world efficiently and does not present himself the way the world expects children to present themselves, is the one person in Wiggum's life who is entirely without guile, entirely honest, entirely present in whatever moment he is in, without the management and the performance and the careful self-presentation that everyone else is always doing. Ralph gives Ralph back. That is what Wiggum gets from his son. And in a life defined by the performance of institutional authority, by the constant maintenance of a role he is not quite adequate to and that the community does not entirely believe in, this gift is enormous. The show gives Wiggum and Ralph their moments. They are brief and they are surrounded by jokes, but they are there. They are the show doing what the show does best, which is to take the comedy and the warmth and hold them at the same time without choosing between them. The comedy is Wiggum falling over. The warmth is Wiggum with Ralph. Both are real. Both are Springfield. Professor Frink. Frink is Springfield's scientist, its inventor, its experimenter, its person of theoretical knowledge applied to practical ends with unpredictable consequences. He is a comedy character constructed from the tropes of the absent-minded scientist. And the comedy works, and the comedy is real. But Frink is also, within the show's logic about Springfield, one of the most interesting figures in the town's ecosystem. Because Frink is the person who could theoretically solve Springfield's problems. He is the person with the technical knowledge to document the radiation, to model the contamination, to provide the scientific evidence that would make the case for addressing the plant's violations. And he doesn't. Not in any sustained, effective way. His inventions solve small problems badly or create new, worse problems. His scientific knowledge does not translate into civic power. He exists in Springfield's ecosystem as a comedy character, rather than as an agent of change, not because the show is protecting anything, but because in Springfield the people who have the knowledge do not have the power, and the people who have the power do not need the knowledge. Frink knows what the plant is doing. Frink can calculate the radius of contamination. Frink can run the models. And none of this knowledge has ever translated into the specific kind of action that would threaten Burns or change Springfield. Because knowledge in the company town is not power. Burns is power. The money is power. The dependency is power. Knowledge is what you have when you do not have the other things. Frank has knowledge. He lives in Springfield. He is a comedy character. This is the town. This, Section 9, Expansion, the marriage continued. There are specific episodes of The Simpsons that exist primarily to test the marriage. Not incidentally, not as a side effect of some other plot, but as the specific, declared subject of the episode. The marriage is the thing being examined. The marriage is the thing that is under pressure. The marriage is the thing that will either survive or not survive the 30 minutes. These episodes are the show at its most intentional, and they reveal, in the aggregate, the shape of what the show actually believes about the relationship. The pattern is this. Something introduces a genuine stress into the marriage. Not a comedic misunderstanding, a real stress. Marge feeling unseen, Homer feeling inadequate, a temptation in one direction or another, a crisis that forces both of them to confront what they have, what they are risking, what the alternative looks like. The episode develops the stress, takes it seriously, allows it to get genuinely uncertain, allows you, the viewer, to actually wonder, briefly, whether this is the one, whether this particular episode is the one where the marriage breaks. And then it does not break. Not because the stress was not real. Not because the problem was too small to matter. Because Homer and Marge find, again, the specific quality of their particular attachment to each other. The thing that is not transportable. Not the love in the abstract, but the specific love between these specific people. This love that has been built over decades of shared experience and shared failure and shared small joys and shared large griefs. They find it. They return to it. They choose it. And the episode ends with the marriage intact. This pattern has been repeated so many times that it has become one of the show's most reliable structural features. And yet it does not feel repetitive, or not always, because the specific stresses are different, and the specific paths back are different, and the specific quality of the reunion is different each time. The marriage keeps being tested because the marriage keeps being chosen. The testing and the choosing are not in conflict. The testing is what makes the choosing visible. You cannot choose what has not been threatened. The marriage is renewed, episode after episode, in the fire of whatever the episode threw at it. This is, in the end, the show's most romantic argument. Not that love conquers all, because the show has never suggested that love is so simple or so powerful, but that love, specifically the love between Homer and Marge, is something that the two of them keep generating under pressure. That the marriage produces more of itself when it is stressed, like a material that strengthens under strain rather than weakening. Homer is not a romantic hero. He is not the partner Marge deserved by any conventional measure. He forgets her birthday. He falls asleep when she needs him awake. He makes decisions that affect her without consulting her. He loves her completely and fails her regularly. And Marge is not the long-suffering saint that a simpler show would make her. She has her own frustrations and her own moments of considering the alternative and her own specific forms of failure. The way she sometimes disappears into the management of the household and loses sight of the people inside it. She loves Homer completely and fails him in her own specific ways. They are two imperfect people in an imperfect marriage who keep choosing it. And the choosing, across 36 years of it, is the thing that makes the marriage one of the great love stories in American entertainment. Not despite its imperfections, because of them. Because the imperfections are specific and human and honest, and the choosing happens in full knowledge of the imperfections, and the love persists not because it is easy, but because it is real. The marriage is real. It has always been the realest thing on the show. And it holds. Let us talk about the specific moment, not an episode, a moment, a single beat in a single scene. That is the truest thing the show has ever done about Homer and Marge. It happens in an episode that is not primarily about their relationship. Homer is doing something. The main plot is happening. And in the middle of it, in a background moment, Marge laughs at something Homer does. Not laughs to be kind, not laughs because she is supposed to, but genuinely, helplessly, the specific laugh of someone who has been married to a person for decades and still finds them genuinely funny in the way that is only possible after decades. It is 3 seconds. It is in the background. It is the whole marriage. The laugh, the The specific, unguarded, complete laugh of a woman who has chosen this man every day for 36 years and still finds him funny, still is surprised by him, still has access to the joy of this specific person. That is love. Not the gestures and the speeches and the dramatic moments where the marriage almost breaks and is renewed. Not the declarations, the laugh in the background of a scene that is about something else entirely. That is the marriage. Section 10. Expansion. Treehouse of Horror continued. Let us talk about what the Treehouse of Horror episodes reveal about Springfield's relationship with death, because the relationship is strange and the strangeness is revealing. Death in Springfield in the regular episodes is managed. It is contained. It happens at a frequency that suggests the town is subject to more mortality than the average American community, but the mortality is processed rapidly and without the kind of extended community grief that actual death produces. Someone dies, is mourned briefly, and Springfield moves on to the next plot point with the specific briskness of a place that has too much to manage to stay with any single loss for long. The Treehouse of Horror strips this management away. In the horror specials, death is allowed to be death. Not a plot point, not a consequence that is acknowledged and then transcended, but the actual terrible thing. The cessation of a person, the violence of it, the horror of bodies that fail and worlds that end and loves that are simply cut off in the middle of their expression. The horror specials are where Springfield's relationship with death is allowed to be honest. And what is honest is this: Springfield is afraid of death. The town and the family and the show are all, underneath the comedy and the management and the episodic reset, deeply afraid of the loss that the format usually prevents. The floating timeline, the impossibility of aging, the suspension of consequence, is a protection against death. If no one ages, no one dies of age. If consequence does not stick, the worst consequences, the permanent ones, can be held at bay. If the reset always comes, the final reset, the one that does not resolve back to baseline, can be postponed indefinitely. The treehouse is the annual acknowledgement that the postponement is not permanent, that the fear exists, that the protection is a protection and not a solution. That somewhere in the universe of the show, in a version of Springfield that is allowed to be fully honest, the people are mortal and the love is finite and the house on Evergreen Terrace will one day stand empty. The horror specials are the show looking directly at this. Briefly, annually, with the specific safety of the non-canonical frame. And then November comes and the safety is restored and the family is alive and the floating timeline resumes its work. But you have seen it. You have seen the version of Springfield where the protection fails. And it changes something about the regular version. Makes it more precious somehow. Makes the couch and the kitchen and the family around the television feel more real, more fragile, more worth staying with. The horror is why the comedy works. The threat is why the safety matters. The treehouse is why Evergreen Terrace is home. Because you have seen what it looks like when it is not. There is one specific recurring feature of the treehouse episodes that deserves more attention than it usually gets: the framing device. The early treehouse episodes were framed by the family in the treehouse, telling each other scary stories. The treehouse as literal space, as the children's space outside the house, as the place at the edge of the yard where the regular rules of the household don't quite apply, where you can tell the scary stories that the house itself would not accommodate. This framing is wise. The treehouse is the right space for the stories it contains. It is the transitional space, not the house, with all of the house's associations of warmth and safety and parental authority, and not the outside world, with all of its actual dangers. The treehouse is the in-between place, the place where you are still close enough to home to be safe, but far enough to be honest. The children in the treehouse are telling each other the truth about fear. Not the managed fear of the regular episodes, where the scare is real but the resolution is guaranteed. The unmanaged fear, the fear that does not resolve. The fear of monsters that actually get you, of aliens that actually win, of futures that actually go wrong in ways you cannot escape. The framing evolved over the years. The treehouse became less prominent. The stories became more elaborate, less connected to the intimate domestic frame of children, telling each other stories in the dark. The specials became more cinematic and less personal. But the original framing is where the treehouse's deepest truth lives. Three children in a treehouse at the edge of a yard, telling each other scary stories in the dark. Because children have always told each other scary stories in the dark. Because that is how children have always processed the fear they are not supposed to have in front of adults. The fear of the big things, the dark things, the things they cannot name but can feel approaching. Bart and Lisa and Maggie in the treehouse, telling the stories the house will not hold, being afraid together. That is the treehouse of horror at its most honest. Not the horror, the being afraid together. That is the thing that the family has always been for, the place where you can be afraid and not be alone in it, where the dark is real and the warmth is also real, and both things are true at the same time. The treehouse, the house, the family, holding each other in the dark, telling the stories, being afraid together, being home. Kaya. Final reflection expansion. Let us sit here for a moment. The room is quiet now, or mostly quiet, or as quiet as wherever you are gets at this hour. The world outside is doing whatever it does. The people in your life are sleeping or working or somewhere in the world being themselves without you for now. And you are here in this quiet with the Simpsons. With the yellow family on the yellow street in the impossible yellow town. We have spent a long time with them tonight, longer than most people spend with any piece of fiction, in a single sitting, without looking away. And the thing that this kind of sustained attention does, Leiten, the thing that you are probably feeling if you have been with us this whole time, is a specific quality of closeness. Not the closeness of someone you just met, even someone wonderful. The closeness of someone you have known long enough to not need to impress. The closeness of people you have sat with in the quiet. The Simpsons family is that for a specific generation of people, and for generations after them who discovered the show in syndication and streaming, and the specific cultural omnipresence of something that has been on the air for 36 years. They are the family you grew up with, in the sense that they were always there, always in the same house, always on the couch, always doing their specific thing. And the thing that this video has been trying to do across all of these hours is to honor that familiarity with honesty, to take the family seriously, to look at what the show actually built, beneath the comedy and the sire and the merchandise and the cultural ubiquity, and to name it clearly. What the show built is a family, specifically a damaged family. A family carrying more than families should carry, shaped by forces larger than any individual member of it chose, maintained by the continuous, unacknowledged, magnificent effort of a woman who chose this life and keeps choosing it. Homer's brain is a map of what Springfield does to the people it contains. Marge's endurance is a portrait of what love looks like when it is not the kind of love that gets celebrated in songs. Bart's anger is the specific anger of a child who sees clearly and cannot make anyone listen. Lisa's loneliness is the specific loneliness of someone too intelligent for the world they are in and too loving to leave it. Maggie's silence is the most intelligent response to all of it, the strategy of someone who has seen what visibility costs and decided to wait. They are damaged, they are extraordinary, they are, in the most honest sense of the word, human. And they are still there. In the house on Evergreen Terrace, in the town that has no fixed location, but that is somehow the most specific place in American culture. In the loop that turns, episode after episode, season after season, the same 5 people cycling through their specific forms of trying. The show is 36 years old. You might be younger than the show, you might have grown up with it as a constant. You might have come to it later and discovered it as a document of a time you remember or a time before yours. Wherever you came to it from, you are here now. With the family, with Homer asleep on the couch, and Marge at the kitchen sink, and Bart on his skateboard, and Lisa at her window, and Maggie watching everything, processing everything, waiting for the moment to act. with the cracked cooling towers on the hill, and the blue hair rising impossibly against gravity, and the three-eyed fish in the river, and the billionaire who glows in the dark. With the deal that was made before Homer was born, and the mother who kissed him goodnight and disappeared, and the father who lied, and the town that forgot, and the family that held anyway. With all of it, the show that was never actually a comedy, the family that was always actually a family, the love that was always actually real. Go to sleep now. The Simpsons will be here when you come back. It always is. That is the whole point. And it is enough. More than enough. Good night.